Hi, Darren. DTIC family, members of the public who are on the platform, members of the media, you are all welcome. So, as you know, we're dealing with the second special appropriation bill, which we'll say more about it. But you're all welcome, and the meeting is opened. Darren, do you have any apologies?
Yes, Chairperson, we received apologies from Mr. Sheikh Imam and Ms. Lonyana, and we also received apologies from the Minister for Trade Industry and Competition, as well as the Deputy Ministers and the DG. They are all attending the Cabinet level now.
Thank you so much, Darren. Then we'll proceed according to the agenda which was sent to us. As I said, we are meeting with the DTIC, Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, today, family, to deal with the second special appropriation bill.
Recording in progress.
For all members, you'll remember that is the bill which seeks to deal with the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, and also the recent the effects of the recent unrest in Gauteng and KZN. So we decided to invite DTIC to come and interact with the committee. But before we come to that, I know some people will ask, what do we have to do with the Standing Committee on Appropriation? Because usually you report to the Portfolio Committee, DTIC. We are a product of statute. The Money Bills Amendment Procedure and Related Matters Act number 9 of 2009, were formed according to that piece of legislation, and we deal with all matters relating to appropriation. So what I always say is that whenever you receive money which is appropriated by Parliament, you define yourselves or yourself as our client. So the second special appropriation bill proposes to allocate 1.3 billion rand to DTIC and its institutions, and that is the total amount that we are dealing with in this bill is 32.85 billion rand. So as you can see, that DTIC is receiving quite a chunk of that money. So when we invite you, before we make this recommendation, because as it stands now, it's a recommendation from the Minister of Finance to Parliament, and the bill gets referred to ourselves. We look at the bill and interact with those that we think we need to interact with on behalf of Parliament, ask necessary questions. And if this committee is satisfied with what it gets from you, then we can proceed and recommend to the National Assembly, for National Assembly to debate and approve if they so wish. So when you come here to this committee, one is to try and persuade us that we really need that money. But this committee, before it decides on that, it would like to be assured that you have got proper plans to use money. As you know, that there's always we're within a constraint of the fiscus. So we should be convinced ourselves that we can proceed and recommend to Parliament that that money be appropriated to our good selves. And based on that, then the National Assembly will decide. But also, not about just going forward. For you to be able to convince us that you have got plans to deal with the money that you allocate to you, it becomes very critical that we also get to know what has happened before with the monies that you have been appropriated. So I just thought, let me give you that context before allowing you to proceed. Let me just check, in the absence of the minister and the deputy ministers and the DG, Darren, who's leading the delegation?
Chairperson is the Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Khan.
Mr. Khan, CFO, we are very much welcome with your team. You'll continue and introduce your team and deal with your slides. I saw that you have got about 75 slides, but I saw that most of them are, well, there are also annexures there, and I don't think you intend dealing with the annexures. We'll give you, let's try and see whether you can compress everything within an hour, and then let's take it from there. But what I'll do from now, I'll hand over to you, and I'll only be coming back to you after 1 hour, so as to who speaks and when. It's you who'll do that. Mr. Khan.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, honorable members of the portfolio, honorable members of the Standing Committee on Appropriations, the staff of Parliament, colleagues from the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, the Industrial Development Corporation, the National Empowerment Fund, and members of the media. Chair, as you've indicated in your introduction and the clarity provided, we welcome the opportunity to address the Standing Committee on Appropriations on the specific measures, the plans that we intend utilizing the 1.3 billion rand, and how we will use that funds to support the companies that were impacted by the recent unrest. Chairperson, as you've indicated, we've also briefed both the Portfolio Committee and the Select Committee of the Department of Trade and Industry on the department's plans. And we are hoping that with this briefing as well, we can get your support and your guidance on how we move forward with the program. We have included in the delegation this afternoon the colleagues from the Industrial Development Corporation and the National Empowerment Fund, who are important partners in the rollout of the economic recovery support interventions. Chairperson, there will be one presentation this afternoon, but representatives from both the DTIC, the IDC, and the NEF will present particular slides. Chair, I will introduce the delegation from the department, and will kindly request that both the Chief Executive Officers of IDC and the NEF do the same. Chair, I will also maybe, whilst I'm doing the introduction, kindly request Ms. Sulofelo Mushi to load the presentation so that we can go quite quickly into the presentation, and we will do our best to keep within the 1 hour that has been allocated to us. Chair, within the DTIC delegation, we've got Mr. Stephen Hannibal, who is the Deputy Director General for Economic Research and Coordination. We've also got Ms. Susan Mangole, who is the Acting Deputy Director General for Industrial Finance, Mr. Yunus Hussein, the Acting Head of Invest SA, and Ms. Mpho Ramatla, who is the Chief Director for Finance. Chair, if I can kindly request Mr. TP Nchocho to introduce the IDC team, and Ms. Feliciwe Mtetwa to do the same for the National Empowerment Fund. Thank you, Chair.
Chairperson of committee, Ndadubtelezi, good afternoon to you and to the members of the Honorable Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to come through. My name is TP Nchocho. I'm the Chief Executive of the Industrial Development Corporation. My colleague, although she's not well, she has connected the Chief Operating Officer, Ms. Joanne Bate. And then there are two colleagues of mine, three other colleagues of mine, Manoj Sionath, he's a unit manager responsible for small business finance and regions. There's also Mr. David McLuha, who's responsible for partnership programs and local enterprise development. And then Gerald Tinonitsana as well. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chairperson, and honorable members of the SCORE committee and colleagues from the DTIC, IDC, and the National Empowerment Fund. It gives us great pleasure, Honorable Chairperson, to be part of this delegation, which will allow us to share the experiences that we have gained on the ground when we were physically visiting the companies that have been impacted by the riots and the social unrest. My name is Pilisiwe Tetwa, and I'm accompanied by my colleagues. I have Mr. Slakalane Mulepo, who's the Divisional Executive for Significant Investments and Strategy and Planning Division. I think the name is self-explanatory. I'm also accompanied by Noktula Gomo, who's the Senior Manager for our SEDU division. So that is where we do our enterprise development initiatives. There's also Rui, who's the Senior Manager for Internal Audit, because for us, Chairperson and obviously our colleagues from IDC, we pay particular attention to how these funds will be dispersed. So the internal audit function becomes very critical. And then there's Zama Kanyile, who is the executive for our Umnoto fund. Umnoto, that is where we do acquisition finance type transactions for companies who are looking at acquiring whether 100% or everything, 100% or 50% of established companies. So that would be my delegation, Honorable Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Chairperson, if we can go straight into the presentation. This is the presentation outline. I will deal with part one of the presentation, and then my colleague, Ms. Susan Mongolia, will present part two of the presentation, followed by our colleagues from the IDC, and then the NEF. Chairperson, also as part of the presentation, there is a number of annexures, and this gives the committee some insight on some of the companies that have been supported across both the provinces, and also the type of company supported, which is big and small companies. If we can then move to the next slide. Chair, this slide provides context under which both the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, as well as the IDC and NEF have put together and developed a support package and are in the process of implementing the same. The context is there was widespread unrest and looting, as well as damage of businesses, which occurred in parts of KZN and Gauteng from the 19th to the 18th of July. The unrest resulted in loss of many lives, undermined business and consumer confidence, caused very significant damage to property, was well coordinated, disrupted supply chains, and caused loss of businesses to many firms. The DTIC group developed an integrated response that included the Department of Small Business Development and other parts of the state at national level, as well as provincial and at district and municipal level. If we move on to the next slide. In response to the unrest, in the early days of and in the wake of the civil unrest, the DTIC put together a number of immediate interventions, and we immediately created a channel of communication between firms and security services through a phone bank, taking and making calls, setting up an email hotline for affected firms, and contacted the security forces to alert them of impending or actual unrest action. We held a number of virtual meetings with firms affected and with business associations to mobilize efforts to counter the threat to persons and property. We worked within government to reopen the N3 artery between Gauteng and KZN, as well as the reopening of ports and securing key secondary roads. We undertook a number of site visits to industrial areas, affected firms, distribution centers, and shopping malls. We also met with community and other leaders, visited communities that were affected, and addressed meetings at unions and shop stewards. We conducted a survey across industries to determine the level of damage, to develop an appropriate support measure to assist companies. We worked with key supply chains to secure the flow of food and medicine and to enable retailers to restock their distribution centers and stores. We also addressed concerns by neighboring countries on potential disruption to the flow of goods. Next slide. We also identified alternative supplies where KZN-based factories were damaged. We supported companies to unblock challenges to get production and distribution working again. We developed an economic recovery fund worth 3.7 billion rand, and this was announced by the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition. The department also contributed to the broader 38 billion rand relief package announced by the Minister of Finance. And we also supported efforts with food and medical supplies to communities in distress through the Solidarity Fund. We also mobilized support from private sector for small businesses. We also collated data from business groups and undertook economic modeling of the impact on the looting as well as the damage. We also gazetted exemptions to the Competition Act to enable businesses to coordinate the efforts to secure food, medicines, and essential goods. The department also, in conjunction with ITEC, published a special rebate facility that enables manufacturers whose businesses were damaged to import free of duties those goods not available locally, subject to commitments on rebuilding the businesses locally. We also engage a number of international investors through Invest SA regarding security stability as well as safety of personnel. The DTIC group drew on multiple resources to quantify the extent of the damage. This included a self-reporting survey of businesses by the DTIC, and which we'll go into further detail in the next few slides. Estimates by the SA Property Owners Association, and projection by the SA Council of Shopping Centers. The estimates provided very useful data, although showing different results as the samples are different and some of the data is based on actual damage whilst others are based on worst case scenarios. In terms of the online survey that was conducted by the DTIC, this survey was launched on the 18th of July with information requested on the impacts of the unrest and the potential support required by affected companies. More than 1,100 businesses responded to the survey, and 67% of the respondents was from KZN and 33% from Gauteng. 58% of the respondents have insurance, while the balance does not have. And I think this gives us a good sense of the required support that was required in terms of how the state has developed the support package. The information that we requested on the survey was on the company and the information on the different companies. the estimated cost of the damages, the potential loss of orders or sales over the next 12 months, and the potential impact on jobs. We've also requested information on sectors in which these companies operate, as this gives us a good sense of where our support was required. In summary, as I've indicated, approximately 1,100 businesses responded to the survey, and that 1,100 businesses indicated estimated cost of damages in the region of 7.4 billion rand, as well as potential loss of orders in the region of 16.88 billion rand, as well as potential loss of jobs in the region of 14,000. If we move on to the next slide. These are some of the results from the survey. 703 respondents were from Gauteng and KZN that indicated that they required financial support. And out of the 703, 42% had insurance, whilst a significant number that did not have any form of insurance. If we move on to the next slide. We've also requested data on district level. And what we can see here is that most respondents across insured and uninsured businesses are from the city of Ekurhuleni, the city of Johannesburg, and the city of eThekwini. In eThekwini, 26% of the respondents are from townships such as Komashu, Amlazi, and Verulum. In the city of Johannesburg, 46% of businesses are in townships such as Soweto. If we move on to the next slide. We've also obtained data from the SA Property Owners Association. And here we can see that that as part of their data that was collected, more than 100 malls were either burnt or suffered significant fire damage. 112 shopping centers were either looted or damaged. 1,223 ATMs were destroyed. Some 269 bank branches were damaged. 1,787 retail stores were damaged or impacted. And a number of retail stores were either looted or affected by the unrest. We also seen a number of pharmacies that were destroyed beyond revival. And we also seen communication infrastructure that were damaged. In KZN, the physical damage and some of the numbers that were reported were that 45 warehouses suffered extensive damage, including 22 factories, 139 schools, 37 delivery trucks, 1.5 billion rand of stock was looted, as well as a potential 20 billion rand loss to the KZN GDP. We will also see on the right hand side of this slide, a number of big retailers were impacted by the unrest. If we move on, in terms of the information that we've received from the SA Council for shopping centers, we can see that we've also seen damages in Mpumalanga, in which 36 retail stores were affected. In Gauteng, 1,468 retail stores were affected in some way or form. And in KZN, we see where the majority of the impact was 2,377 retail stores were impacted or affected by the unrest. If we will move on. A chairperson and members of the Standing Committee on Appropriations. These are some pictures of some of the site visits that were conducted by the ministerial teams, including the minister, the deputy ministers, as well as the DTIC, the IDC, and the NEF teams. So this is a picture of a clothing factory in Isithebe, and you can see that there was extensive damage. Similarly, we can see these pictures are retail stores in KZN and Gauteng, and we can see from this that they were, the looting and the destruction were beyond repair. These are some of the industrial sites in Pinetown, And once again, we can see from the pictures that there were extensive damage. In terms of the site visits, we can see that there were a number of site visits undertaken by the DTIC and its entities to a number of affected areas, both in KZN and in Gauteng. And the key purpose and the key objective of this was to understand the extent of the damage and to ensure that whatever support package put forward adequately addresses what's happening on the ground. These site visits were also complemented with a number of other departments like Social Development, the Department of Labor, as well as SASRIA. And I think these were quite important to ensure that as part of the rebuilding and the reconstruction program, both the DTIC as well as SASRIA had adequate and information to ensure that the rebuilding happens timelessly. If we look at the economic impact, we start off with the production side of the economy. We could see that in the initial stages, the production side was significantly impacted, albeit temporarily. The pace of reconstruction of the affected businesses will vary depending on various factors, such as the extent of damage, the excess and the extent in which capital can be raised, as well as business prospects. Most adverse production effects will be temporary, but some operations may not resume. 61% of non-insured businesses and 60% of insured businesses of the affected firms that were surveyed indicated a likely resumption of operations within 3 months. In terms of the production activities that were impacted, we've seen a number of companies in the clothing and textile, in the food processing, as well as high-tech steel and metal fabrication sectors, as well as retail. We've also seen extensive damage in agriculture, in farming activities, in which 135,000 tons of cane that were burned. We've also seen a number of service outlets that were damaged, destroyed, or temporarily affected, particularly retailers, in which a number of spaza shops, food retailers, bakeries, beverages, pharmaceutical companies, clothing, professional, medical services, and personal care. We also seen a number of restaurants and fast food outlets that were affected, as well as printing services and internet cafes. As indicated, a number of financial services activities were affected through the destruction of ATMs and the looting of some of the branches. We've also seen vehicle dealers and car part businesses were impacted. And we've also seen a number of wholesalers and distribution centers that were impacted. In general, we've seen a number of supply chain disruptions, and we worked quite closely with a number of companies through Invest SA and the IDC, as well as the NEF, to ensure that supply chains are brought on board as quickly as possible. We've also seen disruptions in transportation and logistics sectors. Certain key transport routes were temporarily closed. Numerous trucks and other vehicles were destroyed, as well as we've seen temporary disruption at ports, which impacted performance in terms of exports, as well as import of key supplies. If we move on to the next slide. On the expenditure side of the economy, the unrest and looting will impact quite significantly on household consumption and fixed investment. And these are the two most detrimental effect components of these are the two components that will impact quite significantly on the South African GDP. Exports and imports affected during this very limited period. And then we've also seen a number of disruption in a number of supply chains and the running down of inventories accompanied by and following the rebuilding. The reduced household spending will see income effect of job losses. It also impact access to retail infrastructure in certain areas, and also consumer confidence will be dented. On the investment side, we will see business and investor confidence dented, both local and foreign direct investment. Certain investment plans will have to be postponed or reconsidered, as well as the rebuilding of investment by the rebuilding of infrastructure by private and public sectors. If we move on to the next slide, this gives an indication of the damage to the sugarcane fields. We've seen 135 farms that have suffered extensive economic damage to the burning of sugarcane. These small-scale farmers supplied 5 key mills in Scottburg, Gingin, Lovu, Kwadukuza, Mtunzini, and Tongat. About 135,000 tons of sugarcane were rejected for processing due to the extent of damage. And it's estimated that these farms employ approximately 8,000 workers. These farmers have requested support mainly in the forms of grants, and the IDC is currently engaging them to consider the request and to identify ways in which the DTIC and the entities can assist in this regard. If you move on to the next slide, this slide provides some data with regard to recovery time. Of the targeted group that were surveyed, around 60% of them indicated that they will resume full production within 3 months. And this was across insured and uninsured businesses. And this is actually a good sign amongst all the devastation that we've seen. So this requires quite significant support from the state and a lot of unblocking that's required to ensure that these businesses are able to then resume full production in a short space of time. If we move on to the next slide. In terms of the package that's been presented to support affected individuals and businesses, a total support package of around 38.9 billion rand was announced by the Minister of Finance to support companies that were impacted by the destruction and looting, as well as the tightening of COVID-19 related restrictions. A large portion of this package was for the social relief fund. We've also seen monies given to the temporary employer-employee relief scheme, as well as we've seen the deferrals of PAYE, as well as excise duties for qualifying companies. There was also an expansion of the employee tax incentive for 4 months. And within the DTIC family, we've launched a 4 billion rand economic rebuilding package together with the Department of Small Business Development to support companies in distress and covering a number of different areas. Further resources are also being mobilized from the private sector to ensure that we are able to have a broad reach in terms of our support. If we move on to the next slide. In terms of how this package will be funded or will be financed, there was 700 million rand of funding that was reprioritized within the DTIC baseline towards this program. We've also received 1.3 billion rand in additional funding from the National Treasury. The IDC reprioritized and allocated 1.5 billion rand from their balance sheet, as well as the National Empowerment Fund, who has provided 250 billion rand from their balance sheet. The components of the funding include different support packages and generally termed as a blended product. We will, as part of this program, provide grants. We will also provide loans, mostly in the form of concessionary loans and at concessionary terms, to ensure that these companies are adequately supported. And these concessionary loans will typically support working capital, machinery, repairs to premises, as well as fitment and replacement centers. We've also provided a bridging finance facility, which covers cash flow challenges until SASRIA and other insurance payouts are made. If we move on in terms of the next slide, as part of the rollout of this program, we've also identified a number of risks, and this slide provides a number of risk mitigation measures, which the DTIC, together with the IDC and NEF, will manage as part of the rollout of the program. We've seen in the early days that the pipeline was very small, and we use various channels of reaching clients to ensure that they understood exactly what the state was providing, including a number of site and area visits. We've also reviewed processes to ensure that our support is provided timeously and there's no unnecessary red tape that blocks these type of support measures. We've also seen that a number of companies were reluctant to take on debt, and in response to this, we've also considered conditional grant funding options, as well as concessionary terms for loans. With these type of measures, we've also faced with potential corruption and fraudulent claims. And in response to this, we've developed a number of anti-corruption measures, which included an email hotline. We've also engaged the Auditor General of South Africa to initiate and to consider conducting real-time audits on the rollout of the program, similarly in which the Auditor General has conducted on some of the COVID relief measures. We've also looked at the area of double dipping and enrichment. And literally what we've done is that we've partnered across the state to ensure that whatever support measures that are provided, all the DFIs, including the DTIC, small business, CIFA, are well aware. We're also working together with the UIF so that they also have a good understanding of which companies are supported through this program. Like with all state support, and as the chair has indicated in the introduction, we are faced with a fiscal constraints, and as we roll out this program, we need to coordinate our efforts together with SASRIA and within the DTIC group and the DFIs. We also combine together with the rollout of this program, combine both financial and non-financial support, as number of companies who we've engaged throughout this last 2 months have indicated that not all support that is requested is financial. Sometimes some unblocking that is required, and we've used our Invest SA team to ensure that such support is provided. Moving on to the next slide, this gives us a summary of the number of applications that has been received thus far. As of to date, as of the 10th of September, the number of approvals was sitting in the region of 55. This included the 55 covered 136 sites, and the value of approvals is in the region of 675 million rand. The disbursements to date is in the region of 261 million, and through this support, we approximately 6,800 jobs will be retained. In addition to the above, the IDC is considering rescheduling 9 existing clients, or rescheduling payments of 9 existing clients affected by the unrest for a facility worth 42 million rand. The IDC is also engaging the sugar industry to ensure that an adequate support response is provided to them. And we've also seen that the IDC is partnering with the Gauteng province, which will obtain a 50 million rand allocation with the Gauteng Propeller Fund. The DTIC is also finalizing a 600 million rand proposal for rebuilding of critical infrastructure damage during the unrest. Chair, the next slide covers the support measures provided by the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. And Chair, through you, if I can invite Ms. Susan Mangole, who is the Acting DDG for Industrial Support, to take us through the next few slides. And she will then be followed by the IDC team and then the National Empowerment Fund. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, CFO. Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, honorable members. Good afternoon, colleagues. From what the CFO has mentioned, the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, there were various measures that were taken during the period of the unrest that include the webinars that were held in conjunction with the provinces. In KZN, the DTIC was part of the webinar that KZN arranged with various stakeholders to assess the damage as well as to just confirm the support required. The IDC also held the webinar together with some of the stakeholders, both from KZN and Gauteng, just to unpack the recovery fund that is available. Furthermore, the DTIC hosted another webinar that actually covers most of the businesses affected, starting with small businesses, informal sectors. That webinar was attended by over 1,500. The webinar was aimed at trying to collaborate all the efforts. The webinar was attended by SASRIA as well as UIF, but also with some of the private sector funding, including MassMart, of what they are offering to the township businesses. Over and above that, the DTIC launched the recovery email where they're receiving inquiries from various businesses in terms of what type of support, what is it that they require. The next slide. During that week of the unrest and even after that, the department was engaging with various businesses. Invest SA consulted with over 60 companies, which include LG, Sumitomo, Mahlebe, DeFi, Cipla. The Invest SA also participated during the clearance or assisted these companies with clearance at the port that include BMW, J&J, and Biocore. In partnership with the KwaZulu-Natal province there and Invest SA, the DTIC, what they did during the week of the unrest, the global business services mainly service call centers from various countries. They assisted the sector to be back in business as quick as possible. Through Invest SA again, Cipla Metro was also looted, but then the department managed to assist them, and they are also working with them towards getting them back to reopen. United Pharmaceutical Distributors was also one of the companies that was looted. They were assisted to be full. They are now currently fully operational. The other business that was also assisted is also Sumitomo, where they had, and I think members they've seen in TV, they had their tires being looted. Sumitomo were assisted to be back in business. They also partnered with the industry and the police on the slogan of "Say No to Looted Goods." Next slide. Chair, as the Chief Financial Officer has stated, at the beginning of the crisis, the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, together with its entities, they reached out to various stakeholders, including National Treasury. But one of the key things was to set up support. The first one that happened was that through the department reprioritized 700 million from its allocation. The IDC also availed 1.5 billion from the balance sheet. The NEF availed 250 million. This was in response to some of the requirements as raised by the respondents of the survey. One of the key things that we also did during that week, we consulted with SASRIA, and together with SASRIA, we then look at how do we support these companies. The reason for that, Chair, I guess from the result of the survey, most of the companies were not insured. Even the uninsured one, they were not sure how long the support will do. We were doing this to make sure that we respond as quick as possible, and also we give responsive support of what the company requires. We also worked in collaboration with the Unemployment Insurance Fund. The reason for that, Chair and honorable members, is that one of the grant portion that we are offering is to employers to bring back the number of jobs that they were employing prior to the unrest. So while we encourage employers and while we avail support to actually for employee salaries, we had to then check with UIF in terms of the support that they offer. Over and above that, once the company is operational, then we need to make sure that there is no double dipping. Then the UIF will have to then stop the support. So all these measures are implemented across various entities of the DTIC, IDC, NEF, as well as CIFA, UIF, and SASRIA. We have sessions where we're sharing information, also sharing in terms of who got support and who actually support with what. The next slide. Chair, the 1.3 billion was actually structured coming from the lessons we had last year with COVID. I think we were asked to set up the COVID fund last year. We were faced with the same crisis as this. We have used the Manufacturing Competitiveness Enhancement Program as one of the program, and we followed that method. Through that, we then put a request to National Treasury of 1.3 billion to actually recapitalize the program to be able to support various entities. The support of the 1.3 billion is going to top up the 600 million of the infrastructure grant, and then the 900 million will then be going directly to businesses across manufacturing and retail sector. Of the 900 million, 500 million is going to be remaining with IDC for the MSEP Economic Stabilization Fund, as well as the MSEP Job Creation Fund. Chair, the main objective of this program was coming from the outcry of many companies, given that even though the crisis was in Gauteng and KZN, but then most of the companies indicated in the survey that they had to close business, they had to expand, they have to beef up security. So there was a need for some working capital support for these companies because most of the value chain are actually interlinked. Also with the National Empowerment Fund, we have set aside 400 million to mainly support the support that goes towards the very SMMEs, as well as some of the companies in the retail sector. So this package is actually implemented in partnership with both IDC and NEF, while we also collaborate with SASRIA and other entities such as CIFA and the UIF and DBSA. The next slide.
Sorry, ma'am, before you proceed, just to make sure that you are all in the same wavelength, ourselves and the public out there, the MSEP, this is an acronym. What is the full name of it, and exactly what does it do? The MSEP, Economic Stabilization and Rebuilding Support Industrial Loan.
Okay, thanks, Chair. The Manufacturing Competitiveness Enhancement Program, it's a loan facility that is administered by the IDC that goes towards to support manufacturing companies with working capital at a lower rate. The stabilization fund offers the funding at a 0%. Chairperson, the CEO of the IDC will go in detail on this particular program, but the MSEP has been a program that was set up in 2013 during the first crisis as a loan component of the economic recovery package of then. So this has been recapitalized every year. With COVID, we have sent 700 million to set up the COVID fund, which was distributed to IDC, NEF, and CIFA. With the economic distress, Chair, that was also through the special adjustment, the 500 million also went through the MSEP facility that is administered by the IDC. Then it was also in partnership with both IDC and NEF. But both the CEO of IDC and NEF will go into details in terms of the requirements for companies to access the funding. Is it fine, Chair?
Perfect.
Okay, thanks. Next slide. The next one, Chair, is the Critical Infrastructure Reconstruction Program. One of the key things, Chair, what we have seen is that a lot of malls that we have previously partnered with, funded through either NEF and the IDC, together with the critical infrastructure in the department, were destroyed. Some included some of the industrial parks in KZN, Isitebe, and then some of the malls in Gauteng. So the program was set aside to actually, as a grant, to support the infrastructure that have been affected. So this program is available at a 50% cost sharing, kept at a 30 million grant. The main objective of this program, Chair, is that while most of the infrastructure will be insured by SASRIA, there is also an element of the bulk infrastructure, such as your electric supplies that have been affected, your water supply, as well as some of the bulk infrastructure that are key for the economic activities in the mall. So we've opened this program for both the mall owners to then put in an application whereby they need support to fix some of the electrical and the bulk infrastructure that service the mall, as well as the municipalities that to assist them in terms of fixing some of the infrastructure, given that this program came at a point that none of the municipalities did not plan. Next slide. Chair, just in summary, the program is available to all registered entities, the mall owners, with the municipalities that are affected in KZN and Gauteng. What is actually key is that the companies need to, before they start with fixing the infrastructure, they need to put in an application. Currently for this program, we're working with SASRIA in terms of assessing and in terms of us tracking some of the support, some of their infrastructure assessment. So we have over 30 staff in KZN that are currently assessing to say, where do we require the grant, where there's a shortfall, where SASRIA does not cover, this grant will then kick in. Chair, can I now hand over to the CEO of IDC? Thanks.
Perfect. Continue, TP.
Chairperson, thank you very much, and greetings to members of your committee, colleagues from the NEF and the DTIC. Chairperson, this first slide really is just a summation of the very first steps that the IDC took upon the onset of this unrests. And that first step really was to do an impact assessment. Chair, the impact assessment that we did for a start was a narrow one, in a sense that it was focused only at evaluating what the impact has been on clients of the IDC, business partners of the IDC. So we did our engagements in the normal standard way. We got our officials to call the clients, both in KZN and in Gauteng, where there were visible areas of distress. Email systems were used to contact our client, and later on, as the situations calmed down, we had our officials walk in the streets from our offices in Gauteng and in KZN, visiting the actual sites that have been affected. So really, this was the first step in the journey towards assisting. So if we move to the next slide, Chair, this is just a reflection of what we found out, the results of our IDC client impact assessment. In total, in those areas, about 283 of our clients responded to our emails and other forms of communication. And we could establish that about 38% of them were impacted in what we call indirectly. Indirectly in a sense of that maybe they couldn't get their supplies to their factories or to their stores, or their own logistics systems have been interrupted. They can't get goods to market. And then there were those who were directly affected in a sense that factories had been burned and things like that. And these are only IDC clients, Chairperson, but as you'll realize, when we started opening up our assistance program, indeed we are assisting everyone, not only IDC clients. We also started talking to our clients about would they be needing finance. A lot of them had a lot of trepidation around borrowing when they were in such distressed circumstances. And we indicate there, Chairperson, that indeed it was clients across a variety of sectors, chemical industries, medical companies, textiles were hugely affected, particularly in the KZN area, as well as machinery companies. Chairperson, the graph on the right-hand side, not really to worry about, it just indicates from the IDC's perspective, the rand value of these impacted clients of the IDC. So we sought to quantify to say, these clients of ours who have been affected, if something were to go wrong, what would be the impact on our portfolio as the IDC? And interestingly, the rand value, as you can see, is higher in the Gauteng area, a little lesser in the KZN area, in rand value terms, based on the IDC's portfolio. It's an interesting observation. But again, I want to emphasize, Chair, this is a narrow assessment of IDC's own clients only. Moving forward, Chairperson, to the next slide, this is an important one because we needed to have a look and say, in this impact evaluation, how many jobs did we see which were at risk? And this is the picture that we saw, that indeed IDC clients who were affected, approximately in the order of 64,000 or so employees were affected one way or the other. Either they are out of jobs, or maybe they have been asked to stay at home, and so on and so on. So it is this kind of information which was very useful, combined with all the other set of informations as gathered by government and business organizations. All this information then was helpful in terms of helping us working together with the DTIC to formulate a response package, which Chairperson, when we go to the next slide, is just a little bit of deeper details, Chair, regarding on a nitty-gritty basis, how many clients were impacted, in what sectors, in what provinces. We needed to get this picture in order to really have a good sense of the impacts. So as I indicated, businesses are affected across all sectors, a lot in the textile industry. The nature of the impact in the form of disruptions of supply chains, delivery of raw materials and goods and so on. And then of course, there were impacts that we saw on about 8 or so of our clients who ran tourism establishments. You know, unfortunately, people's bed and breakfast kind of establishments and so on, which were adversely affected by the unrests. Chairperson, with your permission, moving to the next slide now to talk about the response package. And my colleague, the CFO from the DTIC, touched on this to say the IDC put together $1.5 billion from our own balance sheet, from our own resources. We approached the board of the IDC and requested this allocation in order to use it as a response input to this situation. And in addition to that, as indicated, 400 million was allocated from the Manufacturing Competitiveness and Enhancement Scheme or Program, MSEP, totaling what is available to the IDC to 1.9 billion rand. So as indicated, 1.4 is in the form of loans, Chairperson. The other 100 million we structured purely as grants to small businesses, targeting specifically in the township areas, small businesses that require 1 million or even 500,000 in some instances to get back on their feet. We also put aside a small amount, relatively small amount of 10 million rand as a corporate social relief, you know, where there were people who suffered from maybe shortages of water or deprivation of food and things like that. We worked with some NGOs to make available this money. We distributed it amongst about 8 or so NGOs, 1 million here, 1.2 million there, and then they would pass it on to beneficiaries to provide the much needed relief where people maybe had lost like houses or accommodation and things like that. The last one I've already touched on, Chairperson, i.e. the Manufacturing Competitiveness Scheme. Before I leave this slide, Chairperson, I just want to underline the point we make under 1.4 billion, which is that this funding is offered at concessionary terms. And I just want to point out, Chair, to the committee that it is concessionary at 2 levels. Firstly, a loan that is taken is rated in terms of interest rate 0% for a period of 1 year. And then after that, because we are trying to help them get back on their feet, then after 12 months, the applicable interest rate is 5% from the IDC side, fixed over the term of the loan. This is even lower than our own cost of capital, but we understand and we obtained approval from the board to say, this is an extraordinary situation that requires extraordinary actions. The second element of concession, Chairperson, committee members, is on the repayment moratorium. Again, we give these businesses a period of 12 months to get on their feet. Only after a period of 12 months will they start repaying on their loans that are granted, so that there is breathing space and recovery. Moving on to the next slide, Chairperson, it is important to touch on the institutional operational arrangements that we have put in place to implement this scheme. How are we delivering? So the first point that we make there is that we have created interface points. My colleague, the CFO, touched on this to say online platforms, but also the activation of our officials in both KZN and Gauteng physically to visit sites. The call center in the third instance is very active. And then as I indicate, field visits by our officials. So that was a way of reaching out to those businesses that are in need. The second point to mention, Chairperson, is that we have created a dedicated team. The IDC, like any other organization, has various units or departments, but we pulled people out of their regular jobs and we put them into a team led by managers in order to focus on nothing else but doing this work. So it's a team of about 16 people. They have a coordinating team of 4 people, in total is 20. The coordinators are the ones who constantly receive the inquiries, they constantly receive the emails, and they pull those out and process them into the system. So from a process point of view, Chairperson, without going into the detail, safe to mention that we obtained approval from the board of the IDC to follow a completely separate business process path So we don't follow our normal process of doing this and going to that credit committee and sitting once a week or once every 2 weeks and so on. So the executive committee of the IDC was then mandated to be the one that considers applications, and we sit, Chair, on a daily basis. We consider applications, we consider progress, we solve for problems. Let's say maybe there is a problem with the terms of agreement with the client. We make decisions every day on this. The submissions for this program have been made lighter. The IDC is known for being very elaborate, produces 60-page submissions and things like that. No, here we are talking submissions that are much shorter, anywhere between 8, 12 pages, maybe 15 at the most, where we have streamlined everything. And the business development teams and the legal officers, as well as the risk management people, work together all at the same time on one transaction in order to speed up the decision cycles. So the governance structure has been approved. The EXCO is the body that is running with this. And as I indicate, doing this on a daily basis, indeed, in order to track progress. Moving forward, Chairperson, these are some of the statistics of the many inquiries that we receive. Basically, we follow a process of a lot of applications come into the organization. When number one, they are taken through a screening process to see if they qualify. Like in any other environment in this situation, Chair, even a person from Cape Town will just send in something, you know, when they don't qualify, someone from Limpopo North or whatever the case might be. So there is a screening process, and then we get into the actual due diligence evaluation process, and then we make the decisions accordingly. So in order to close, Chair, just to supplement the statistics that were mentioned by the CFO earlier on regarding progress, I can just mention that because the clock is ticking every day, we approve things every day, we disperse money every day. The numbers as of today, Chairperson, are that whereas the presentation indicated 373 million worth of approvals from the IDC as at the date of the preparation of the presentation, that number as of today has gone up to 499 million, about 500 million from that 1.5 billion pot of the IDC. And then with regards to the MSEP facility, the one of 400 million that we are administering, we have actually approved 181 million of that. So in aggregate, Chairperson, the numbers are progressing well. If you add these two, it means as of today, we are sitting at about 680 million. The disbursements, the CFO showed about 192 million disbursed. As of today, the number is around 210 million. I actually think if what we were planning to disburse today goes through, that number has probably jumped up to above 250 million rand or so. And lastly, Chairperson, I can just mention that we are considering extending our reach by working through, shall we call them intermediary partners? We haven't provided that information here because these are potential partners that we can work through. Like for instance, the sugarcane affected farmers that we referred to, a large population of them, about 180 million, sorry, 180 of them or so, the growers. And what we are trying to formulate is to see if we can work with the sugar milling companies, provide them a wholesale facility, and then they can pass it on to the individual sugarcane growers in the KZN area. And if we succeed with these partnership arrangements, Chairperson, we believe sometime next week, probably, we shall have added another 300 million rand or so of approvals on top of the 680 that we are at now. So I think we have gained momentum. There is a sense of rhythm in the organization, and we are doing our best to make this funding available to beneficiary businesses and enterprises that so desperately need it. Thank you very much, Chairperson. That brings us as the IDC to the end of the section. We will be around to take questions at a later stage. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Good afternoon, once again, Honorable Chairperson and Honorable members of SCOA. Maybe firstly, Chair, just to express our gratitude to the DTIC for allocating the initial 250 million rands to the NEF and a subsequent 400 million, which has then enabled the NEF to also play a role in terms of providing support to the companies that were affected. This was in addition, Chairperson, to the 100 million that came directly from the NEF's balance sheet. So, Chair, we have more or less followed the same methodology that was highlighted by the colleagues from the DTIC and IDC. So when we were hit by the crisis, Honorable Chairperson, so what the NEF did immediately, we immediately undertook an assessment of the impact of the unrest on our existing portfolio within our affected areas. So very much similar to what the IDC did. So among the repercussions that we have identified were job losses, the closure of businesses, the damage to property, loss of stock, as well as setbacks such as the loss of customers and revenue, adding to the challenges that were already created by the COVID-19 pandemic. So I have to say, Chair, that is, if you look at the physical destruction of what we are looking at, but we shouldn't forget the psychological impact on, you know, on the entrepreneurs who were really who were affected by this crisis, because when our colleagues started doing their due diligence, when they were physically on the ground, interacting with the various business owners, they also realized, Chairperson, that the business owners are traumatized by this experience. So whilst we are allocating the monetary support as government, I think there has to be other government departments that can assist us with the trauma that was suffered by these enterprises. So our situation analysis was also informed and enriched by the survey conducted by the DTIC immediately after the unrest. So we were now adding, so when we started doing the physical DD with these companies, we're adding to the work that had already been undertaken by the DTIC. So it is because of these findings, honorable members, that together with the IDC and under the leadership of Minister, the DTIC, the NEF then embarked on the interventions under discussion today. I have to say, honorable members, that obviously the Minister has been spearheading this whole initiative. We've been having weekly meetings with him because he wants to see how the pipeline looks like. He wants to monitor the approvals on a weekly basis. So I'm just mentioning this, Honorable Chairperson, just for the committee to be aware that this is what the Minister and the colleagues from the DTIC have been doing. So as honorable members are aware, and as prior speakers have referred, so the country witnessed the spate of civil unrest that resulted in the destruction of property and companies that I have already alluded to. So the NEF portfolio, Chairperson, was also not immune to the impact of the destruction. So the unrest affected a total 39 NEF funded businesses, accounting for 430 million rands, And also just to mention to the honorable members that a lot of our SMMEs, obviously Black-owned SMMEs, are located in the townships and rural economies. So you'll find that when we started doing this work, you'd find that a lot of the companies that were affected, especially on the SMME side, companies operating in the locations, in the townships, that those companies were NEF clients. So we are supporting both NEF clients and the other clients that were not necessarily on our portfolio of investments. So, but I'm just saying it was a terrain that the NEF is familiar to, because we even have a fund that is called Rural Township and Development of the Rural Economies. So we've been doing this work for quite some time now. So 13 businesses were severely affected from our own balance sheet, and these have also a combined value of 137 million. Thankfully, only 26 businesses valued at 271 million were interrupted for an average of 5 days and are now back in full operation, and they're back in business. So together, these account for 1,195 jobs. So to date, these businesses that came directly from our portfolio have lost a combined revenue of more than 50 million rands. Next slide, please. So Honorable Chairperson and Honorable Members, as previously indicated, a total of 301 million has been approved by the National Empowerment Fund, and 69 million of it has been already dispersed directly into the economy. And these approvals and disbursements will impact on 2,719 jobs. So out of the 301 million, I did mention, Honorable Chairperson, that the NEF is also making a small contribution from its own balance sheet. So if you look at these numbers, given the time when the funds were dispersed to the time when we started doing the work, we believe that we're making a bit of progress on the ground. We've been hard at work, and we really, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, we actually hit the ground running. So we have heeded the call. So this has been achieved through the assistance of a variety of businesses. So in our portfolio, the companies that we are looking at, it would be petrol stations that are owned and managed by Black investors, Black entrepreneurs, by Black women. It's restaurants, it's the whole hospitality industry, it's the logistics businesses. So the trucks that were bent on the road, I'm sure you could see them on the road when we had the riots. There are warehouses. So I'm talking about the ones that we have already approved, just to give you a sense of the types of companies that we are looking at. But honorable members, there remains a significant need now to focus on the rebuilding of infrastructure, such as the malls, industrial parks, etc., that supports these smaller businesses that have been supported thus far. So the remaining pipeline of our investments that we're looking at is currently sitting at 2.1 billion, honorable members. So these are all the companies that were visited by the NEF. So we currently stand at 2.1 billion. And we are hopeful that we should be able to move with speed in partnership with other various DFIs to actually make sure that we disperse the amount that I'm mentioning here. So this critical infrastructure funding could also assist the NEF in unlocking a further 352 million rand in funding to SMMEs in KZN and Gauteng, because our shareholder has actually emphasized the need for us to ensure that as we will be reconstructing and rebuilding these companies, that we also play a role in terms of making an impact on other developmental objectives of our country. So as we are rebuilding the companies, we look at obviously transformation issues, we look at expansion possibilities, and so on and so forth. So to date, We have received, the companies that have received support from the NEF, so 246 businesses spanning through 14 district municipalities have actually now registered interest in the NEF economic recovery funding. So that is in addition to what I was sharing with you on our pipeline. Next slide. Thank you. So we thought it necessary, honorable members, to share the criteria with the committee so that you can see what are these issues that we'll look at before providing this financial support to the companies. So the first one is that the business must be located in Gauteng or KZN, but if it's a company that is involved within the logistics, business, because obviously there are companies who are moving goods from Gauteng, to KZN, who are involved in the logistics sector. Those will be considered even though they are not necessarily based in other provinces, in KZN or Gauteng. The beneficiary must be a registered company, close corporation or cooperative, and the applicant must be a taxpayer in good standing and must provide proof thereof from the South African Revenue Service. Of importance, the applicant must demonstrate that jobs lost during the unrest will be restored or increased within 12 months of funding. Where a business is insured, funding can be provided as bridging finance, and the DTIC allocated funding will not accrue any interest, and the average tenure of the loan will be 60 months. Next slide, please. So I won't cover this slide, Honorable Chairperson, because it was covered by our colleagues from the DTIC. Next slide. So Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, we are pleased to report that the NEF has worked with its existing clients and has ensured that 80% of our affected clients return to full operation. I have already reported that we have been in contact with all of these enterprises. But of significance, Honorable Members, is that we have allocated resources to this particular task. So we have 30 investment professionals who are on the ground as we currently speak. So they've been crisscrossing the whole of Gauteng and KZN. In fact, in KZN, we have the 30 investment professionals. In Gauteng, we have about 20. So we have allocated about 50 of our investment professionals to focus on this work. They've gone in areas as far apart as Endlondloweni, Hlutankungu, Kwanongoma, Ixopo, Mkhanyakude, Jozini, Kamnyandu, Phoenix, Umlazi, Newcastle, and all of those areas, honorable members. We have held the webinars. I think the DTIC has already made reference to that, but we're also pleased, Honorable Chairperson and members, about the recent partnership that we have concluded with the Solidarity Fund. You may be aware that the President announced the establishment of the Solidarity Fund when he appointed Madam Gloria Serobe as the chairperson, and obviously it has its full board. So they were also looking for an intermediary to work with, which is what the CEO of the IDC was referring to. They also have their own intermediaries. So we are going to be the Solidarity Fund's intermediary, because they were looking for an organization that would be in a position to physically go on the ground to interact with the various companies, and they have allocated the first tranche of 150 million rands towards providing support to this initiative. Thank you, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members.
Thank you, DTIC, thank you, IDC, thank you, NEF. Let me go back to this to the CFO of DTIC and see whether he has got anything to say, because what we'll be doing now, I'll be allowing the honorable members to ask questions. CFO.
Chairperson, just in closing, I think that's the report from the department together with the IDC and the NEF. Attached to the set of slides is the different companies that have been supported. I think the profiles of the different clients are there. But I think what's quite important is that you see that there are a number of intermediaries that have been utilized as part of the rollout of this program. You would see IDC working quite closely with Trade and Investment KZN, in which they have established a partnership or a fund of 30 million Rand to support a number of companies. So Chair, I think in closing, thank you for the opportunity, and we look forward to any comments or questions from the committee. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you so much, CFO. Honorable members, you know how we do it. Can I get indications of the honorable members who would like to interact with the presentations by the CFO and the team, by the CEO of IDC, Titi Choncho, CEO of NEF, Philisiwe Mthethwa. Let's see, honorable members.
Chair Sarupin.
Honorable Sarupin.
Matafa.
Honorable Matafa. Honorable members, I'm waiting for you.
Kaiso.
Honorable Kaiso.
Mlenzana.
Honorable Mlenzana, can you in the meantime try to get the better spot? You were cracking, so I want to hear you very well when you pose your questions. Any other honorable member would like to come in? I've got Honorable Sarupin, Honorable Matafa, Honorable Kaiso, Honorable Mlenzana. Any other honorable member would like to come in?
How is my voice now, Chair?
Much better, Honorable Mlenzana, much better.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure. Unganyakaziki lapho mkhona ume tu ungabaleki lapho khona. Okay. Honorable Sarupin, do you want to break the ice?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. And Chair, again, apologies about the video, but as I've explained in the past, I live in an area of poor reception. Chair, I've got two questions to DTI. The first is around prevention of double dipping for support. So you might have someone who has a claim from SASRIA and then has a successful claim, but also then has tries to get support out of funding and so on when they've got full payouts, et cetera. And I did hear about working closely with SARS and making a tax certificate requirement, but what are they doing to monitor multiple applications through multiple channels for support and making sure that we don't have double dipping? That's the first question. And then, Chair, my second question is around firms that are micro-survivalist enterprises that were struck by the looting and put almost out of business, so that might want to restart. And I make reference to small sole proprietorships, et cetera, where as a tax entity, it would be registered as the individual owner and not necessarily as a firm. And how would they be able to even to access support and get over the threshold? I mean, we shouldn't forget that particularly when dealing with CBDs and small towns and so on, that you are dealing with, in particular, lots and lots of sole proprietorships. And what sort of barriers are in place that have been identified, and how are they going to be minimized so that we also allow sole proprietors to be able to get in and access some of this funding, because that's where I think the biggest need is going to be. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Sarupin. Honorable Matafa.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Good afternoon, Chair, honorable members, the media, members of the public, and the CEOs and the top management. Chair, let me start first by welcoming the presentation, and secondly, commend the team for the speed at which they are processing applications for assistance. Clearly, they can see the need to fast-track these applications because the unrest really had a dent on the economic fortunes of the country. But now, Chair, having said that, I just have one question with regards to the speed and efficiency of processing of applications. As we are busy with the assistance due to the unrest, what is happening to applications that would have been received in the normal course of business? Are we seeing the same speed of processing? What is the number of those applications compared to the ones that are strictly related to the assistance with regards to the unrest in KZN and in Gauteng? The second question, Chair, that I have is to, and you will note, Chair, my inputs and questions will be mainly around processes, will not necessarily speak to figures. The second question would be on the amounts that are proposed as allocation. Are they in line with the need as would have determined by the survey that was taken, as well of the client impact assessment? And maybe there may be a shortfall. What other measures can be put in place to ensure that those other companies that are unable to be provided with assistance are also relieved of the pressures that were created by the unrests that had actually taken place? Chair, the third point is on the issue of compliance. And then I'm happy that there is a commitment by the DTIC that they will be utilizing various channels to reach possible clients. I take it that will also have to do with educating potential applicants on how to access the packages that are available through the DTIC and its entities. Now, Chair, I'm raising this simply because in most instances, when we engage with our constituencies, they always lament the fact that the compliance requirements are cumbersome in order for them to be able to derive benefit from these particular packages that are made available for the men on the street or for small and emerging enterprises. Now, having said that, Chair, on the issue of compliance, this also speaks to the point that was raised around the coordination between the IDC, the NEF, as well as the DTI on the basis of ensuring that there is no double dipping. Now, I'm raising this on the issue of compliance, Chair, to find out if whether this coordination can continue even beyond the intervention with regards to the unrest in KZN and in Gauteng, particularly as it relates to compliance. And I'm raising this, Chair. Honorable Sarupen speaks about multiple applications in different spheres of government and of the DTI. In most cases, you find that a company which applies in multiple spheres and multiple entities, they have to supply similar documentation to support their applications in these various establishments. Now, the reason I'm asking about the coordination continuing is that do we foresee a point whereby if I have applied my system or through a particular process, the documentation that I upload to support my documentation or my application rather, can be accessed by other organs so that it relieves the applicant the pressure of having to comply as far as documents are concerned. The other one, Chair, is on the product type as it relates to the blended finance. I've noted on slide 48, the NEF speaks about the criteria in terms of what is required to access the funding. Now, my question is on the criteria, what will be used to determine the size or the quantum of the grant vis-a-vis the quantum of the loan? Say an applicant approaches the DTI and says, or the NEF and says, my need is about 10 million. And there's a view that it can be a blended finance. What determines if whether the grant should be 5 million and the loan should be 5 million or 30/70 either way? I'm just interested in clarity as far as that is concerned. Chair, the other point is on the almost linked to compliance, but it also speaks to qualification criteria. My view, and this is a view held by many business people, that since this is a government-backed institution, the rates and the application criteria should not be as rigid as that of the commercial bank. Now, I see that on slide 37, there is mention of concessionary rates. I'm just interested to find out if whether, can we say that it will be more favorable to consider funding through this platform as compared to the commercial banks? Here it's an issue of comparing as well as the issue of favorability of processes firstly, secondly of the rates where products that are offered, particularly the loan, has a rate that is required to be paid on top of the amount that was advanced. Chair, the other point is just on the communication. Mention is made that new ways of reaching clients will be pursued. Now, can maybe we be taken into the confidence of the team in terms of what measures, or are there any particular avenues that have been identified? I see they mention area visits as well as site visits. Here I take it that the visits will be mainly in the offices where these institutions are located. Are there any other avenue to ensure that there is mass reach? Because I will tell you, Chair, I have never came across someone who says, I have been assisted by this particular DFIs, but you always have lamentation of the fact that they are declined, they are not responded to, the process is long-winded. So I'm just interested to find out, are there avenues that are identified? The last point, Chair, and thank you very much for your indulgence, is on the number of applications that are received. There was a slide that speaks about the number of applications received, as well as the number of sites affected. Now, my question is, do we have a view that the number of applications that are received are incongruent with the number of sites that are affected? And if maybe there is not an uptake that is in line with the particular number of sites, what could be the reason that there is no uptake? And if indeed there is no uptake in congruence with the number of sites affected, what measures can we put in place to ensure that those that are affected do come forward and make their application, and we are able to interact with them to see how best we can assist them so that they can also assist the country to turn around its economic fortunes? Having said that, Chair, I really appreciate the time to engage, and once again, thanks for the team for the sterling presentation. It really assists, and I'm sure that we'll come to a very positive outcome as far as the community is concerned. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Matafa. Honorable Kaiso, can you please come in?
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson, and my colleagues, the Department of Trade and Industry, and all members who have come to present before this committee. I think this presentation, it is well put before this committee, and we must state upfront that the measures that have been announced for the government to intervene have come at a very opportune time, whereby the performance of the economy has been facing multiple challenges moving forward. So our people really appreciate this intervention made by the government, that there is a need to support our people, especially at the level of business, So now my questions, Chair, or engagement will be around the few areas here. So let me start with the, you see, this destruction and of property and infrastructure and the intervention that has been announced. I want to go to the area which is related to job losses, where in around 14,000 of about 14,000 jobs, according to DTI, has picked up job losses. Now, there's also an assistance that is going to be put forward for this business to can be able to perform and also grow jobs. But I want to know from the DTI or any of that, as you support this business, are there any measures that you would put, for instance, because some will be taking some measures such as to lay people off, and that is going to cause a problem because now it can't be correct that the government is intervening at the same time people lose their jobs. So I just want to understand from the TI, are you going to be able to put measures such that now all the people, business people that you are assisting who are going to get this assistance, aren't they going to lay off the people or retrench people? So it's very, very much important because it will be wrong of the government then to assist these companies. Tomorrow they lay off or retrench people. On the, yes, normally in our big cities, during this riot and destruction of property, we sometimes focus on the formal business, you know, because when we talk about the small business, mostly they've been, you know, formalized, but then there is a significant portion or fraction of the people who are doing business in town. Somebody's talked about sole proprietors, but I want to refer in the, to the informal traders, because they form a bulk, also they contribute, they make a significant contribution to the economy of the country or in the city. But then when these riots and rampaging took place, we never calculate them. But I think it's proper that there must be a way that should be worked out so that at least there should be sort of, you know, a formula that is being worked out so that they also can be able to benefit. Like I'm saying that they make a significant contribution to the economy of those major cities in KZ and Gauteng provinces. So they might have not been included, or I might have not read well what you said about them, but I think there should be a way that what do we say about them? Much as we have been able to, you know, to make possible that there's an intervention in as far as people who have been, you know, economically distressed, and those families were able to benefit from the broad measures which the government has introduced. But when we talk about the economy, and we often not refer to the contribution that is being made by the informal traders when these intervention measures. So I think there should be a way that you also can be able to tell us, is there any way that you're gonna look after the informal traders as well? Now, going to one area is that of the small scale farming. And I want to make reference to the report which was done by according to Competition, quarterly essential food price monitoring, which reports that there has been a significant decline in as far as, you know, small commercial farming is concerned, which leads to concentration of the market. And we know that there are particular reasons, or there should be reasons which are there, which includes the issue of lack of investment for the small scale farmers to can, thrive. And now I want to know from the DTI or NEF, are there any measures that are going to be put in place to support these emerging small scale farmers as well to return to operation and market where they are affected in one way or another? Now on slide 48, I want to make reference on the issue of access to funding. Access to funding, you said that for business, it will be only for business in Gauteng or KZN. Now, I have a situation here in Free State where there are companies which supply in KZN. They have been affected because now companies in KZN have been destroyed, of which we're receiving some certain supplies from companies in Machabeng. So now what has happened is that these companies have been shortchanged in terms of time that they would utilize for production. So workers then would be their wages will be affected, obviously, because of the situation in which those companies in Free State have been affected. Now, when you say only in business in Gauteng and KZN, we often forget that now they are not operating in isolation, those companies which have been affected. There are also other companies in the province, like I'm making an example, in Machabeng, for instance, there are companies which operate with the companies in KZN. So what do we say in that instance as the DTI? But obviously the request would be, things should be changed or should be managed in such a way that even those companies who are in other areas which were not directly affected by the violence, but indirectly affected because of the nature of the operation of those companies, have been affected. So lastly, Chair, I think I've covered the areas that I wanted to raise, but I just wanted to now get a response on those few questions as the responses are being drawn up. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Kaiso. Honorable Lenzana, please come in. I hope we are still standing where we left you. Honorable Lenzana, please come in.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I trust so. No, thanks, Chairperson. Thanks, Chairperson. Chairperson, let me start by also enjoying colleagues in terms of the appreciation of the presentation made by the CFO and team. Chairperson, the first question, which for me was actually, aroused by bullet 2 of slide 37, has actually to some extent been touched by Honorable Kaiso. This relates to the informal traders. One is interested as to whether are informal traders actually recognized, and if no, why? If yes, how? And how are they assisted? I'm raising this, Chairperson, because in the areas of KZN, for instance, you will notice that you have got your farmers who are not necessarily, formal in terms of trading, but they do a lot of farming and they have been seriously affected by the riots and so on. I hear that they are busy with assessments and all. How do they then touch base with such? If you get to, for instance, in some areas, right in the CBD of Durban, you would have women tailors there who do bulk work, and they were also affected. And I wonder if they are actually recognized as such traders. Then the second one, Chair, would be for the CFO. If CFO, you can pride yourselves on how you stick to your cash flow projections and all, particularly if you can talk to us around both your over expenditure and your under expenditure, if there is any, so that we may know, yes, you are saying you have been and are very able to spend correctly this amount that you are appropriating to you. When talking to that, Chair, if the CFO can also talk to the monitoring strategy, how do you monitor your clients, particularly when it refers to your defaulters? How do you take care of such? And then the last one, Chair, would be, I was interested when it was indicated that there is a mutual link between the department and Sasiria. If one can know or be alerted as to presently how much CFO, of course, in terms of percentage terms, not in real figures, as Honorable Mataf was saying, just percentage terms, as to how much have you, as of now, been referred to Sasiria, where you felt that you are unable to handle the claims as submitted by your clients. Thanks, Chairperson, and once more, let me appreciate the presentation. I will look forward for the response. Thanks, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Lenzana. I would like you to mark that space where you are, because we're able to get you throughout your input, so that every time you come in, we just go there. It must be like a lion, mark your territory, and then we.
Okay, Chairperson, I will do exactly that. Thanks.
He must put a stone.
I beg each and Honorable Peters, it's your turn. Please come in.
Thank you, Chairperson. And I want to take the opportunity, like the colleagues and yourselves, to thank the DTIC and their entities for the presentations made here today. Chairperson, like usual, if you come in at the tail end of any discussion, you find yourself in a situation where you have to either say I've been covered by colleagues, or like the previous speakers have indicated. But let me raise the questions that I had worked on prior to the presentation started. And I've also noted, Chairperson, that in the presentation, the presenters did elaborate more on some of the aspects in their presentations that were forwarded to us. So in reading the presentation alone, and in the presentation being made by the drafters, it gave more clarity. So the questions that one would have formulated might have been answered, but I think it is important that I get more clarity. Chairperson, my first question is with regard to businesses which had requested assistance.
Let everybody, hello, come on.
Hello, Chair.
No, just hold it, Ronald Peters, there's some interference. There's, come on, please mute your gadget. Come on, please mute your gadget. Come on, I can see you are not muted yet. Can you then, okay, that's fine. Continue, Honorable Peters. Thank you. Honorable Peters, come in.
Thank you, Chairperson. I was saying, yes, Chairperson, thank you very much. I was saying that with regard to the businesses that had requested assistance or financial support, are there those that you would have picked up that the request for financial support to DTIC and its entities and the claim to the insurance are marked different? Because you'd find that there are those who claim this from the insurance and claim differently from or ask for assistance from the department and its entities. But also, what is the role of the DTIC and its entities in encouraging small and emerging businesses to subscribe to the insurance industry as well as to SASRIA as reinsurancy? I'm raising this because there's an indication that the big companies and were the biggest beneficiaries, Chairperson, if you remember the presentation made by SASRIA to us, but also in the presentation made by DTIC and its entities, there's also that particular type of indication, which leaves one worried that you have small businesses, you have emerging businesses that were seriously and adversely affected by the events of July 2021 in KZN and Gauteng. And yet they were either not insured or grossly underinsured. At times, the underinsuring or lack of insurance is based on the premiums that one a company has to pay. So I want to know whether the DTIC sees it necessary to encourage small businesses to subscribe to insurance. But also, Chairperson, there was something very worrying that one saw during this coverage of the July 2021 GP and KZN looting and unrest. The incidences of looting of funeral parlors. My question, Chair, is if the DTIC is probably aware or has been receiving probably intelligence reports on second-hand mortuary equipment or the reselling of coffins is concerned. I'm asking this, Chairperson, because you would know in our communities there's always a belief that the funeral industry does resell or recycle the coffins, and therefore the looting at funeral parlors created that impression, and therefore that there is a market for second-hand coffins and mortuary equipment. Are there any businesses, for example, small businesses and other services like your pharmacies that would not re-emerge? And I'm concerned about those pharmacies which took the leap of faith by investing in, especially our communities, the townships, and they are the ones that would probably be not properly insured, and some of them struggled to get the necessary equipment. Like, for example, your dentists or the oral health service providers, because those are services that are far and in between in our communities. And if they get looted, it means that the confidence of the service provider to go back and invest in the communities is waning. Is there some of those that you would have engaged and found that they will not reopen? In slide 21 of the DTIC, I want to know how much of this support was to emerging businesses, in particular, women-owned businesses, those who are youth-driven, and those who are owned by people with disabilities. And in particular, I'm focusing in the emerging economy, and in particular the township economy. Honorable, I think it is Honorable Kaiso raised the issue, and it is whether the DTIC and its entities can be able to indicate to this committee which areas or which businesses, because you'd find that many of the provinces, like the other 7 provinces that might not have had the incidents of unrest and looting, but the suppliers of certain services and programs and certain what do you call it, components are sourced from those particular areas. Chairperson, you would know that in our communities, we are entering the Mekiti and Matlapa and Manyalo type of situation. And some of the fabrics selling companies in our communities have indicated that their suppliers are unable to supply them with fabrics because they are, or materials to make clothes, because their suppliers were, their factories or places were burned down. How is that situation being addressed? But also, Chairperson, which manufacturing or component assembling companies might not return to service? For example, I'll make an example about my own personal situation. I had a challenge with a washing machine where I've been informed that by the repairers that DeFi parts or spares are no longer available. So it would mean that if you buy a DeFi machine right now, it's risky, because if anything happens to it, you would not have a part to repair it. How many of those type of appliance component or spares are affected? But also, Chairperson, I want to know, in conclusion, what anti-corruption mechanisms have the DTIC and its entities put in place to prevent the mismanagement of the allocated funds? We don't want the return to the PPE situation. But lastly, Chairperson, the last one. Now that the mask wearing, sanitizing, and hand wash has become a new normal, enhancing hygiene and a healthy lifestyle is what is the DTIC and the Competition Commission able to do to make sure that the prices that has drastically gone down? And I'm sure you would be aware, Chairperson, last year this time, to buy a box of 50 masks was more than 500 rand. And right now you get them for about 99 rand. So does it mean that there's a chance that these prices might still go down now that the demand is actually at the level, and it has been something that we have been able to get accustomed to? In conclusion, what has been the impact of the July 2021 Gauteng and KZN looting and unrest been on jobs in particular? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Peters. Any other honorable member would like to come in before I come in?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, Honorable Kaiso, quick one.
Just one question. I think the outbreak of COVID-19 has taught us a lot with regard to manufacturing of PPEs, and that nearly cost us we had to panic a lot with regard to the availability of PPEs. Now, at this stage, I just want to know from the DTI whether, with the call for localization, has the DTI been able to provide support to make sure that now there's local procurement of these PPEs in the manufacturing sector? Because we can't just talk about localization, whereas the business people or our local producers do not get any support. I just want to get to know that. If the answer, if you say yes, we did provide support then how many of those local manufacturers have been supported? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable
Chair.
Paiso.
Chair.
Yes, Honorable Member, Honorable Peters.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry to come back. I am abusing this opportunity that you're opening the window for people to come back. I just want to find out from DTIC whether there has been a resurgence of now the over-reliance on imported goods, especially in the food and other industries, because for me, that would be an important aspect that we need to look into, especially with, you would remember, Chairperson, last year we had an issue with regard to the poultry industry and how DTIC is protecting the RSA poultry industry against competition of the US and Brazil. And having seen farmers and farms of poultry or the poultry industry role players being looted also, what is the DTIC going to do to make sure that there's no a resurgence of that over-reliance on international or imports? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Peters. Any other honorable member? Okay. Let me come in and again thanking the presenters for their informative presentations they made to the committee. Thank you very much. But before I come to my questions, it's very clear that there's so much interest in what DTIC and your portfolio of companies, DFIs, you are doing. You can see with the number of the questions that the honorable members are asking. So it's because we, from where we are, we understand that the problems that we are having in the country, we won't be able to solve them until we have inclusive economic growth in the country. And we see you as being at the center of that. The president speaks about the proverbial silver lining in a dark cloud, that the circumstances that we find in, we also need to take advantage of them to make sure that we transform and really transform the economy. Again, we see DTIC, NEF, and IDC as being very critical for that journey. So, given the time constraints that we are having today, we're not able to engage with all those things. One thing I can promise you is that we are going to engage with you in the future to understand exactly what are you doing in your areas to help the country with its objective of economic growth and the derationalization of the economy in the true sense of the word. And on that day, CFO, I think will invite NEF on its own so that we can have enough time to understand their workings. And then we'll also invite IDC to get deeper to what they are doing. Because from where we are seated, one of the things that we are seeing this year, we were having a budget of 2.02 trillion rand as a country. And that excludes the budget of some of our DFIs, some of our SOCs. Now, we are saying as this committee that we want to see where that money goes. So we'll definitely, so I'm just saying that that's the only promise that I'm giving you, that even if we haven't given you time, we'll definitely be calling you, because as this committee in the 6th administration, we are seeing this committee as also playing a very critical role in ensuring that we transform the economy in the true sense of the word and try to understand how are you using your monies, where do they go? Are we serious about empowering Black people of this country? Are we serious about empowering women and the young people? Are we serious about empowering people who are living in rural areas and in the townships? I think it's the high time that we engage in a very serious manner as far as that is concerned. So I'm saying I know for a fact that the oral members didn't have enough time today, because specifically we've asked you to deal with this the second special appropriation bill of 2021. So I just thought let me start there. But having said that, with the allocations that we are having, even at this present moment, we are really requesting you that don't lose sight of the broader agenda of this government of trying to transform the economy, where its people for 350 years were kept on the margins of this economy. And you, as these institutions, are critical. And we're very clear from where we're seated that it can't be business as usual. As CFO, I'm sure you hear very well what we're saying, and we know very well what we're looking at. We know these level ones that usually comes here. Certain companies are level one, but when you look at it, when you look at the flow through of those monies, nothing goes to Black people. And we're saying that from where we are, this is not what we want to preside over. Coming back to my questions, I've seen that there is an estimation of 20 billion rand loss to, you say KZN GDP. If it's KZN GDP, it's RSA GDP. So, but I've seen a lot of numbers. 20 billion, Sastra was here, they came with a big number, and so on and so forth, and other people are, if you read in the media, can we try to gravitate towards some number, at least coming from government, so that we can have some reliance that we put on the numbers that we get. So perhaps the question there is that how much reliance or confidence level that we can put into this to these numbers. My second question is, it's now 2 months. I just want to check with the three presenters, what percentage of companies or how many companies have you taken back to operation? IDC is talking about the still considering request of affected farmers. General business, it's things change overnight, but farming, it's one very sensitive area because it depends on seasons. So there is a question of responsiveness and agility, especially looking at certain industries. So I'm then saying exactly where are we when we're saying we're still considering requests. That's one. But two, we're also talking about using intermediaries in doing that. Have you ever considered using intermediaries of Black Farmers Association, using intermediaries of the provincial DFIs, perhaps who are closer to the action? More flesh, NEF and IDC. You are speaking about 250 million rand and 1.5 billion rand respectively. But can you give more flesh onto that this money has been distributed? This is the profile of the people that we have distributed to in terms of race, in terms of gender, in terms of whether people are young or old. Where are we exactly? And perhaps give us some projection that perhaps in the next 2 months, that's how far we have gone. I'm sure you know that again, a day, 2, a week, a month, which passes without getting this type of support which is there, can mean life and death to these businesses. We are blaming in one of the slides poor communication and red tape. I would argue this is an endogenous factor. It just depends on you. What are you doing about it? Why are we having that problem? Why are we not communicating? If you look at on slide 24, it talks about status of applications. Then there is a column of CRP, the Critical Infrastructure Reconstruction Program. That column is empty. What exactly does that mean? Why is it empty? Because in a further explanation as to what Critical Infrastructure Reconstruction Program is, it talks into the infrastructure like the malls, if I understood you very well. So it is on the critical path of success. If that column is empty, everything that we are doing, for instance, you support a business which is supposed to be in that mall, you give it money, it means it won't be able to start. What exactly is happening with the Critical Infrastructure Reconstruction Program? I saw that in your slide 24, it's empty. In fact, all of you are saying that you have been through the length and breadth of KZN and Gauteng. So in terms of allocation and what is on the pipeline, are you able to say, for instance, we have allocated to Kwamhlabe Lingana, we have allocated to Ngwavuma, we have allocated to South Coast, we have allocated to Herikwala, and so on. What exactly is happening so that we can get to the feel as to exactly where you are. Remember, we are politicians, we go to these places and we interact with people who would say that we are still waiting. So it's very important that we get from you, and if there are any challenges, please let us know. Yeah, I think I've alluded to this one. That again, so that we don't lose our project of transforming the economy. We very much want to know how many black companies, that's one, but two, how much of your budget has gone to black companies, how much of your budget has gone to women, how much of your budget has gone to people living with disabilities, how much of your budget has gone to young people, how much of your budget has gone to the townships, how much of your budget is going to the rural areas. That's very important, so that we ensure that these identified people, they don't live up with the crumbs. Yeah, you speak about the MCP stabilization fund, and it has got a lot of concessionary benefits. Again, one would like to know the profile of the beneficiaries of this fund and the geographical spread of those beneficiaries. IDC on slide 34, you seem to be focusing on your clients. If I'm wrong, please tell me. And how do you define your clients at the moment? Yeah. And when in your slides you talk about the rand value, what I noticed there is that it's very high when it comes to Gauteng. Does this not talk generally to the over concentration of your clients in Gauteng? I'd like to hear you on that one. On top of your head, would you be able to, just as things stand now, not even with the fund that you are having, share with us the spread of your clients geographically? That comes from where you said the rand value in Gauteng is high. Yeah, I think I touched on this one, right? That you are looking at intermediaries, especially when it comes to farmers. But I just want to check with you, Is that an optimal way of distributing your funds, especially the intermediaries that you are looking at? And how do you ensure that the money reaches your ultimate beneficiaries, and that again they are in line with what the government is doing, those who benefit from these funds? As you know, I think we're very clear that all businesses should be supported. I think that's one. But in the same breath, we're saying that in that process, let not deepen the exclusion of businesses which are left out, which have been left out by this economy. NEF, you talk about 2.1 billion rand. Can you give us some time frames? When do you think this will be distributed? Are you also having your intermediaries? And please, can you share with us the nature of those intermediaries if you are having them? You also speak about the Solidarity Fund or the relationship that we have established with the Solidarity Fund, which we welcome and appreciate. The challenges that we are having need all of us to work together. But I just want to check, what are the conditions of the Solidarity Fund? Next question, there was something about blended finance. I'm not sure who spoke about it. Can you share with us how it works, who benefits, and so on and so forth? Perhaps touching on Honorable Kaiso, he spoke about the need to protect jobs. Perhaps adding to that a broader question aligned to that will be, what are the conditions of assistance? Do we put some conditions of assistance, especially around these things, I think, the protection of jobs and so on, or it becomes a blank check? CFO and your team, I think we have got a handful of things to respond to. And we also take the view in this committee that we don't want convenient answers. If people are not able to give us answers offhand, we always say, take your time and say you'll write back to us and give us a more response to those things, because we don't want to have answers which are not properly thought of, or perhaps so you don't have statistics with yourselves, and then we come back and say, no, I made a mistake and this and so on. So when you are not able to provide us some questions, some answers based on the broadness of the questions that we have asked from yourselves, please say so and then provide us with the answers at a later date. CFO, back to you.
Thank you, Chairperson, and to the honourable members for those questions. Chair, there were a number of questions that dealt with regard to the anti-corruption measures, which I will touch on. But I think there were also a number of questions relating to the support for township businesses, more especially those businesses that were impacted as a result of the unrest. Chair,
CFO,
yes.
sorry to interrupt you. From now onwards, you are a choir master. You'll decide who does what and so on, which question is being answered by who. We are all ears until you finish and say that we're finished, then you bring back the meeting to me.
Noted, Chair. Chair, so there were a number of questions around the support to micro businesses, township economies, and Chair, what our intelligence has picked up as part of the site visits, as part of the survey, it has indicated that there is a greater need for support to these type of businesses. Yeah, I'm gonna then request the National Empowerment Fund. I think they from the three entities, they will be able to provide quite a comprehensive response. Also noting that the IDC has earmarked 100 million rand fund for township businesses, as well as working very closely with a number of intermediaries like Trade Invest KZN, and as well as the Stockfell Association, to ensure that these support measures reach those type of companies. Here there were specific questions posed to the IDC, which I will then request the CEO of IDC to respond to those. And there were specific questions to the NEF. Chair, I think the questions from yourself around the transformation of the economy, I think that's well noted. I think one of the core objectives of the department is to promote and to build an inclusive economy. And we will be quite happy at a later stage to come and present the different programs that we have within the DTIC, as well as the NEF, and as well, including the work done by the Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Commission. Chair, if I can then start off with maybe the broad questions around the anti-corruption measures, the prevention of double dipping. So one of the key things that we've immediately activated when we put together the package, we're quite aware of some of the control gaps that were in the system when they were as a result of the COVID relief interventions. So we were quite mindful, and at the early stage, we have already engaged the Auditor General from South Africa, South Africa, to ensure that as we proceed in rolling out these interventions, we've also got the Auditor General overseeing what we're doing and providing us timeous insight into what we need to do. As indicated, this program is led by Minister Patel as well as the deputy ministers, and both the minister and the deputy minister has indicated that as we roll out this program, we need to ensure that we build back better, to ensure that we do not see a resurgence of what we've seen in July, to ensure that some of the measures that we've implemented ensures that there are economic activities in the different communities, because what we've seen is that if there is an inadequate opportunities for economic development and as well as job opportunities, there is a possibility that we could see such resurgence. So one of the things that we've been actively promoting across the different programs, and which the minister has requested, is that we need to pull back better. One of the key things in any control system, it's our assurance practices and our risk management systems. So immediately we activated the assurance systems, and that included internal audit, that included engaging with our audit and risk committees to ensure that as we implement these support measures, these areas are adequately addressed. And if there is any corrective action that is required, we can quite quickly ensure that these are in place. What we've also found at the early stages, that there were a number of reports coming from different industrial sites that these areas were completely burned, but once we've activated the teams who went to these different provinces and to these different sites, we quite quickly realized that some of the initial intelligence that came out was incorrect. We then used that intelligence to then work quite quickly with the different agencies within the state, as well as SASRIA, to ensure that these measures are adequate. With regard to some of the process matters around the speed of applications, Minister Patel, as well as the deputy ministers, has made it very clear that our measures and our support needs to be made timelessly. And one of the reasons for doing so is that we needed for companies to come back in full operation as quickly as possible, so that the impact on the economy and on the GDP is not felt as much. This then required both the DTIC as well as the IDC and the NEF teams to relook at their processes. And we've seen a number of changes that were done in consultation with the governance committees to ensure that these are adequately dealt with. The minister has also issued a shareholder instruction that adjudication committees must sit on a daily basis. This is to ensure that all applications received, whether it's one or two, they have to be adjudicated on a daily basis. We've also noted quite early on that the quantum of support was quite huge. We've engaged National Treasury quite earlier on, and in consultation with them, the 1.3 billion rand was a sort of earmarked. But we also knew at that stage that 1.3 billion rand will not be sufficient. In response to that, we've looked internally within our current budget, and we've reprioritized funding in the amount of 700 million rand. But we quite quickly coordinated with both the IDC and the NEF to scale up the 1.3 billion to a 4 billion rand support package. And this is mindful of the very tough economic climate that we're in, but also to ensure that whilst we roll out these financial support measures, there was also a number of non-financial interventions that were required. For example, Honorable Depo Peters raised an important point, for example, component manufacturers that were disrupted. Our Invest SA teams, as well as our sector desk, engage with companies throughout the crisis to ensure that key supply chains that were disrupted were brought on board as quickly as possible. They also ensured that where there were blockages in the system at ports or in terms of public transport, these were dealt with. So there is a number of those type of interventions, but also we've also activated the competition policy instruments to ensure that that instrument allowed companies to then coordinate responses around different support measures to ensure that companies were not impacted in a way that prevented them from moving forward. One of the other key interventions that was put on board in consultation with ITEC, which is the International Trade Administration Commission, was a special rebate facility, which also allowed the companies to, especially companies who had key supply chains and whose supply chains were disrupted and whose supply chain impacted key components of the economies, such as food security. That facility allowed them to then put duty-free some of the different food products, as well as the different components that were required. This facility was done in conjunction with the DTIC team, and there is an adjudication committee that's currently reviewing a number of applications in this regard. So these are some of the additional measures that we've put in place. With regard to the compliance requirements, one of the things that we've also seen quite early on is that that if we were to approach this in a similar way, like we've done in the past, we would have seen that our support measures would not have reached the beneficiaries on a timeous basis. We've also seen that a number of companies who were either looted or had their offices destroyed or damaged could not provide financial information to both the IDC, the NEF, and the DTIC. So quite quickly, we then used other measures like the use of bank statements, that which could still be obtained from banks. But also we saw this as a bigger intervention that was required in terms of the ease of doing business across the board. So we've also used, for example, information that was contained on the BIS portal, and the key thing around the BIS portal, which we would have seen during COVID, that it allowed companies to obtain certificates for companies that provide essential services. But what the BIS portal essentially does, it provides companies to register companies in a very timely way. But it also has a number of verification what in IT terms they call CDIs, which then allows them to verify information with SARS or with the URF, with the compensation fund, and so on. So we use that as a way to strengthen our due diligence, to speed up the process, and to also obtain vital information that was either at CIPC's BIS portal or as part of the CIPC's annual return process, which had very vital financial data. The questions around conditions attached to a number of the support measures, I think from the outset we and as part of the surveys, which also pointed out that we needed to ensure that whatever support we put in place, jobs had to be protected. So one of the key conditions attached to our support is the retention of jobs. And because what we've seen, and I think some of the economic modeling that we've done, is that we've seen that this unrest in KZN will have a direct impact on the third quarter GDP. Current estimates is that it may have an impact of between 0.3 to 0.7% on GDP. So conditions attached to this is to the support measures were quite important earlier on, but also we worked quite closely with SASRIA to see that as we bring on these support measures, we also wanted to ensure that companies that were uninsured are brought into the broad stream of insured companies, because we also want to ensure that, going forward, that these companies see the importance of insurance, fully understand the different products of SASRIA. And one of the key things that we've picked up is that the SASRIA insurance is not very expensive, but the information around the SASRIA products, I think, highlighted the need for us to improve communication in that regard. The questions are from Honorable Umlezana around cash flow projections and how do we monitor clients. So currently we run a program of different incentives in the region of 6 billion rand annually. And this is something that we monitor very closely because we have a number of different programs that support different investments across the different sectors of the economy, be it the auto industry, be it the Black Industrialist Program, be it in the food processing sectors. So it's quite important that we manage cash flow very, very, very tightly. In consultation with National Treasury, these cash flows are managed, but we've also got very strict systems within the DTIC to ensure that as we manage cash flows, it's also dispersed timelessly to ensure that the necessary impact is felt. The questions around our partnership with SASRIA, that's largely it's largely around the reconstruction, the rebuilding program. And I will ask Ms. Susan Mankole to maybe just touch on some of the work that we're doing around the critical infrastructure program. But I think that's quite important, that as we rebuild, there is no double dipping, but to also ensure that this partnership with SASRIA ensures that we build quite quickly. On the questions around women, youth, and persons with disability, one of the key things that which the unrest has highlighted is that we needed to build a more inclusive economy. We've seen, for example, companies that were destroyed because this economy is so integrated in the sense that where we've seen looting to large companies, the smaller one-man shops on the road who supported or provided food to some of those employees in those companies. Those companies were then completely disrupted in the sense that their whatever products or whatever supplies they had were looted on the day. So this impact demonstrated, or this unrest showed us how these inequalities needs to be addressed in going forward. So therefore, in our support measures, in our programs, in our instruments, we need to ensure that as we build an inclusive economy. Chairperson, just two more from my side, and then I will then hand over. On the Competition Commission, we've seen that as part of the early interventions around COVID, both the Competition Commission as well as the National Consumer Commission had to intervene on prices and quality of products that were brought into the economy. And we've seen that both the Competition Commission as well as the National Consumer Commission had to fine a large number of companies for either overpricing or poor quality of products. And this was part of the consequent management that had to be put in place to ensure that these measures or these instruments had the necessary impact. On the localization of PPE, there were two quite important programs. The first one was in conjunction with the IDC, where there was a facility to support PPE in the South African economy, in the production of masks, in the production of sanitizers. But also we saw a very close collaboration with business as well as labor in terms of the production of ventilators. There was a program in partnership with the CSIR in which 20,000 ventilators were produced and funded through the Solidarity Fund. And these ventilators then assisted the health sector to then adequately provide the necessary health care. Chair, I will stop here, but I will then ask my colleague Susan Mangole to then come on, and then we can then ask about the IDC and the NEF to then round up and then respond to the questions that were directly in their area of support. Chair, with your permission, if I can then hand over to Susan.
Thanks, honorable members, and thanks, CFO. Chairperson, under the Critical Infrastructure Program, we are partnering with SASRIA. We did receive applications from Itala and their affected malls. However, because they are insured, so the team is down in KZN working with the SASRIA in terms of assessment. What is key about this is that we're assisting both Itala and Isitebe to put in a bill of quantity to be able to then quantify, to say how much will be then covered by the grant and how much will then be covered by SASRIA. So we're working closely with SASRIA also to just work out to say how much are they availing. So at the same time, once we then start with appointment, the DTIC will be releasing the grant on the shortfall that SASRIA is not covering. The reason you're not seeing approvals is because we need to allow the companies to bring us a bill of quantities. We're also working with over 30 malls that we are also trying to assist them to put in an application, cost, what will actually be covered by SASRIA and what will be covered through the grant. So in the next 2 weeks or so, Itala and Isitebe, with the help of DBSA, they will be starting with the construction because they've completed the bill of quantity and going to the market. And Chairperson, also in the part of the SASRIA, while we're working with them, they've notified us that they've received a lot of claims from shopping centers at the rural areas that are currently not covered. So we're working with them to also pick up and say, how do we assist those shopping centers that are in the deep rural area, but are not covered by SASRIA, even though they've put in claims. Or lastly, on the jobs, Chair, I think one of the conditional grant, the reason we're saying it's blended is that we have seen that there's a potential of job losses given the survey and the information that the companies that they were giving us. So we are giving up to 30% of grant to companies that are able to bring the jobs to the same number within a period of 12 months. So that's the 30% kept at 3 million. So there we are encouraging companies to say, do bring the jobs back and quicker, not over 12 months. The last part of the job also, we're also looking at the companies that are able to increase jobs to say, if you are able outside the provinces, one of the key questions was that there are companies that are going to be permanently losing jobs. Obviously, we need to bring the jobs back into the economy. We are setting up another facility at a 0% to encourage companies to say, do bring those jobs back that we have lost at the companies that are permanently not coming back. Thanks, Chairperson.
Chairperson. Chairperson.
Yes,
excuse me for getting into Susan's mouth before she leaves the platform. If one could be clarified, Chairperson, around the grant versus reference to SASRIA, which comes first? If we can get that clarified, Chair, do they first, as they are going to do the assessment, as she's saying, get the amount, after which then they will, as the department, see that they are unable because of reasons 1, 2, 3, and then they refer, or is it vice versa? Thanks, Chairperson. Thanks for indulgence.
No problem. Ms. Mangole, do you want to come in?
Thanks, Chairperson. I think sorry, I missed that one. With regard, I'll give an example of Isitebe Industrial Park. They've put in a claim with SASRIA. Then SASRIA had told us that they are availing a particular amount. So then the DTIC will then come up with, I think it comes close to about 88 million because there are about 6 buildings that are affected. So what will then happen, Chair, is that because it's a cost sharing, we will be going at the same time. When they appoint the service providers after they have constructed, then when they pay those construction companies, we are moving at the same time. But then with regard to the other support, because there are clients that do not know the timeline of SASRIA, we then offer the bridging facility through both the IDC and the NEF while we are waiting. So as soon as the client receive the SASRIA money, then we are able to then be able to repay back or get it back. The last part of it is that on the grant part for the ones that are uninsured, the grant will only, the 30% will only be deductible as soon as the company demonstrates that they have actually returned all the jobs into production. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Madam. Back to you, CFO and the team. Is it TP?
Thank you, Chairperson, and thanks to members of the committee for a really comprehensive, very deep set of questions. Some of them certainly, Chair, we are going to plead that we come back to the committee in writing because we don't have the information at our fingertips. I'm looking at the questions. The first one was on the SASRIA and how it works and the risk of double dipping. I hope my colleague Susan has explained that. We provide a bridging finance where the claim has been lodged and the claim has been acknowledged by SASRIA, we communicate with SASRIA. They write to us directly and say, this is a valid claim. We are processing it, but as we know, some of the claims are likely to take 6 months, even up to 12 months in certain instances, probably even longer. So in order to bring the businesses into production or into trade is about providing the bridging finance with an acknowledgement, both by SASRIA and the client, that upon receipt of the claim payout, they will then redeem what has been advanced to them in the form of a bridging loan. On the question about micro enterprises, Chairperson, let me just say that there are 3 channels through which we are trying to reach them. Yes, people try, approach our offices directly, but the IDC, in terms of its working mode, it has a small team which is responsible for local enterprise development. Yes, they process those applications. That is the one channel. The second channel, as was indicated, is that with Trade and Investment KZN, we would like to make an allocation available. We have already approved 30 million rand, which they will distribute, primarily aimed at township businesses, small and medium-sized businesses. In Gauteng, as we indicate in the presentation, also MEC Parkstar, who talked about it a few days ago, we have matched each other. They have provided 50 million and we have provided 100 million to create together a common fund for the Gauteng township environment to distribute it through the Gauteng Enterprise Propeller, as well as other intermediary structures that are established and work like that. Again, it is better to provide the details, like in a table format, and provide the numbers like that. The next question was about the speed of efficiency, and I think the concern was, as we run fast on this program, could we be sacrificing service quality in the normal course of events on the other side? Just to assure members that it is the reason why we created a dedicated team for this program, so that the other teams at the IDC can continue to focus on processing applications that come in the normal sense of the word. So there's no prejudice to other clients who are coming for assistance. The proposed allocation is meshed with needs, and could there be a shortfall and so on? From the IDC side, actually what we have seen is that there's been a tapering down a little bit of applications. If I reconcile the numbers quickly, Chair, of the 1.5 billion rand, I've said we have already approved about 600 million, adding up everything, which means we still have about 900 million still available. But the volume of applications that we have at the moment, as of today, was somewhere just over 460 million worth of applications. Of course, they still have to be sifted through. So at the moment, there's actually, at least from the IDC side, more capital than the applications that we are receiving. But the critical question was asked as to where geographically that is, are we receiving applications in those northern rural KZN areas and so on and so on? Are we not falling into the temptation of perhaps focusing on the urban spaces more than that? Again, I don't have the numbers at my fingertips, but yes, that observation is valid, that if we were to look at the numbers now, probably a higher proportion of money has gone into your sort of urban industrial centers and less so to smaller town areas, but we will provide the
Recording
details.
stopped.
And indeed, the minister raised
Recording in progress.
The minister raised this with us on the meeting on Monday. And so that kind of see-through by local municipality and by region, we do have information to date which we'll provide, but we do need to drive more effort in that regard. Compliance, requirements being cumbersome. Members, here really we will ask for your indulgence and beg for your understanding, because the country's laws relating to know your clients, make sure that you do business with people who are in compliance with their tax requirements, make sure that you do business with people who maybe are not part of criminal syndicates or things like that. The laws of the country do require that we perform detailed and adequate FICA checks and validation of identity and sources of money and things like that. So at times it does take time, but we have tried to be as streamlined as possible. For instance, company documents, instead of waiting, we simply contact the company registration office in Pretoria and try and assist clients to pull that information in and so on. So FICA, we have tried to lighten the requirements, but it is very critical because we ourselves, if we don't do it properly, could be found to have broken the law ourselves. So that is that. And then in terms of product type, blended financing, determine the quantum of loan versus grant. From the IDC side, what we try to do is, firstly, we determine, working with the client, their total needs. Let's say they need 50 million rand. We then say, if we do the calculations based on the historical performance of the business, we run high order numbers, what can they afford going forward? And so if we make a projection and say, based on what we know and the information that we have, we can afford probably to repay of that 50 million rand, maybe 35 million or so. So what we then do is we then structure the rest of the funding in the form of a grant. So we try and do a blended funding like that. But it is something that we look at on a case-by-case basis. So we try and match ability to pay with the actual need. Yes, I did explain during my presentation that interest rates are really concessionary. It's 0% on the loan for the first 12 months, and then after that, 5% fixed for the remainder of the term. And then the other form of concession is the payment holiday. So we find a person today, we fund them, we understand that their business still has to recover. So we give them a breathing space for 12 months where there is a moratorium, there is a holiday to pay back so that the business can stand back on its feet. Chairperson, I'm trying to run as fast as I can, being conscious of your time. Please, Chair, the next one is the one that we're going to request to bring back in writing the number of applications received, and relating those to the sites by geography, regions, and so on, those details as I requested. Communication, yes, it looks like we have fallen short through the common platform of electronic media and social media and so on, and the newspapers. We are beginning to go onto radio platforms at the moment, using both local and national type radio stations. So it's an ongoing exercise. We are running an ongoing campaign at the IDC. Job losses, the condition to the funding of the IDC, as the CFO mentioned, is one, a beneficiary has to restore all the jobs that were impacted by the unrests. And we have a post-financing team specifically dedicated for this to go and do an audit a month from now, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, throughout the tenure of the loan to validate that the jobs are still there, and if they can be increased, even the better. Informal traders, as I mentioned, we are trying to reach them through those channels. KZN and GP, yes, and what about provinces that were not directly affected, but it is clear that the member, I think Honorable Member Thaisa mentioned, an example of the Free State. Chairperson, we can just say between us and the DTIC, I had a discussion with the DG, acting DG Malebo. We are looking at this, and we can promise probably in about 2 weeks' time to report back to this committee as to what we shall have formulated regarding assisting those businesses that are located in other provinces other than KZN and GP. But it is clear that their business operations were one way or the other interfered with, be it either sources of supply or routes to market. As far as monitoring itself, we have a post-investment monitoring team at the IDC. And there is a team of 12 that has specifically been identified to be monitoring this particular portfolio over the next number of months. So it was only formed about 2 weeks ago. It will be reporting to the EXCO and the board of the IDC on a monthly basis. I talked to the point about Sasria and how it works with us on the DFIs. Indeed, many of the SMEs, Honorable Peters, are not insured. There is a couple of applications that I saw where not only have we encouraged them to buy insurance, we actually included the premium for the first 3 months into the loan amount. And we arranged the insurance cover, paid the 3 months premium in advance in order to get them covered. Hopefully, they will then keep up with the premiums going forward. Very well observed the point about independent pharmacies that have been adversely affected. My colleague here can provide some stats. Both, I think, in Soweto as well as in the East Rand, there are specific independent pharmacies that we have assisted in order to bring them back to life. They serve an incredibly important service to communities there. And very often they don't need a lot of money. Probably an average pharmacy, very small shop, takes about 1 million, maybe 1.5 million to establish. So those are the kind of quantums that we are talking about, and we are assisting them. Chairperson, we are going to have to come back to you on the demographics around women and youth. We do have those details, but I don't have them at my fingertips at the moment. And then with regards to anti-corruption measures, as was indicated by the CFO of the DTIC, one, we are performing live audits on all these transactions, including the internal audit team at the IDC, and of course they will be supplemented by the team from the Auditor General's office. In addition to the internal control measures, such as the decisions are made on a collective basis. In committee, we all declare interest if there are any, and up to now, I chair the committees. There haven't been declarations of interest, and every member of the EXCO knows if they were to be found wanting, there would be consequences on this. No one person has arbitrary powers. These transactions are approved by committees. They are not signed by one person, not me, not anybody. They are based on committee decisions, which are then duly recorded. There are minutes of every decision, in fact, including audio recordings of every one of the meetings that we hold, and therefore every transaction can be tracked. Chairperson of committee, your message regarding transformation was loud and clear. Indeed, we have been challenged in that regard, so let me not say anything which might diminish your very clear and eloquent message in that regard. How many businesses have been brought back to production and trade? Again, this one, Chairperson, with your permission, please, if you could allow us to validate it and report it back to you. There are a couple. Others I have ordered equipment. Others have ordered stock. So stock still has to be supplied to their factories before they resume operations. So they are at various points of returning to service, so to speak. The affected sugarcane growers, exactly where they are in KZN, the majority of them, and we have identified them by name. We have visited the places. Can we use the provincial DFIs? Certainly, it's a consideration, but we had looked at the milling companies because they already have sort of trade credit facilities. They know them. They already have trading facilities where they take stock and they pay them in terms and things like that. So we thought as a starting point, we could latch onto that as a starting point. But yes, your advice is well heeded, Chairperson, in terms of looking at the sister organizations in the provinces. We will do the projections. We do have the Chairperson regarding deal pipeline. How do we see the approvals over the next couple of weeks? And how would we see the disbursements panning out? It's a rolling set of projections as the applications come through. So we will provide that also in writing. I've already committed, Chairperson, that we will do a see-through of the statistics to local government or local municipal district level, including transformation profile relating to Black people, women, and youth, and so on. Chairperson, yes, slide 34, you're right. That particular impact assessment, as I said in my presentation, it started off as a narrow focus. We were looking at our clients and asking ourselves, our clients, what if they have suffered? How much money do we stand to lose? The exposures of loans and investments that we made. But as time went on, indeed, our assessment and our involvement is not only narrowed to our client community, it is indeed all-encompassing. Chairperson, this phenomenon of investing higher in the main centers of the economy, being Gauteng, Durban, and Cape Town, is like an albatross around the IDC's neck. Yeah. So I might not have the numbers now. It is a matter that we contend with daily. The way we are trying to address it, Chair, is that we have opened up the branch offices in all the provinces to try and originate transactions more and more. And on my arrival, all those branch offices have now been converted into lending channels. So they do have certain delegated authority to provide small and medium-sized loans in those areas. So I'm hoping that I can start moving in the right direction as far as geographic spread is concerned. So lastly, Chair, really we do believe that intermediaries do help us with expanding our reach. They are closer to the beneficiary communities. But to your question, how do we ensure that indeed the money reaches the beneficiaries? And the way we do it, Chair, is through participation in the governance structures. So we get to sit in the assessment and the evaluation committees and the decision committees. And on a monthly basis, all the beneficiary transactions are then reported up to the IDC for record purposes and everything. So we don't send the money and stay away. In fact, the drawdowns are made on the basis of approvals as they go along. The money is drawn on the basis of a list of approved beneficiaries who, through participation in the governance structures of this intermediary, we validate. Chairperson, thank you very much. I want to thank you for allowing us to provide these responses. Apologies that I went a little bit rapidly. I was trying to make up time for you, Chairperson. Thank you.
Perfect, CEO. Thank you. Mrs. Mteta, please come in.
Thank you, Chairperson. So a lot of the questions, Chair, have been covered by my colleagues, but I will just zoom into the questions that relate maybe to the NEF or the cross-cutting matters issues between NEF and IDC. So, Chair, on your broad strategic issues around our role in terms of ensuring that there is geographic spread, you know, in the transactions that we support women-owned enterprises, Black-owned enterprises. When I say Black women or Black-owned enterprises, that's not discriminatory, Chair, because we also encourage partnerships, especially when we do our large investments. So where a lot of funding would be required. So those would be transactions that we actually start from scratch, you know, coming up with pre-feasibility, feasibility studies, taking those projects all the way to bankable feasibility and financial close. So in those ones, we will say, even if Black entrepreneurs have 30%, it's still okay because of the quantum that we'll be looking at. But in the majority of the transactions that we do, we support Black-owned, which is 51% and above. So we look at all of these different indicators: women-owned, youth, geographic spread, where's the project going to be located? Is it going to be in the townships and rural economies? Is there going to be community-based shareholding structures, and so on? So those we refer to as the empowerment dividend, and they are the soft indicators that talk to the impact that our projects are actually making on the ground. So when we take all of those into account, they will determine the ultimate price that that particular enterprise will pay. So let's say in one transaction, you have all of these things that I've mentioned in one transaction. So the pricing model obviously is very complex, but once we have determined the pricing for that particular entity, then we apply these things to come up with the actual price. So if it's women, it's in one of the economically depressed areas of the country, you know, in those small provinces that are not as developed as Gauteng, you'll find that the final price can end up being prime -2, whereas if a project didn't have all of these soft indicators, you could have ended up with prime +2 or something like that. So it's something that we do all the time, Chair. And then on our localization drive, because there's an honorable member, I think it was Honorable Kaiso, who also wanted to understand whether we pay attention to the localization drive when we do these transactions. It's one of our critical issues, Chair, that we look at. So for instance, if you look at the economic recovery program that we're discussing today, we are not just focusing on the retention of the jobs that were there previously. So the minister has urged us to actually look beyond what was available before we actually hit by the crisis. By that, what I mean, Chair, is that, so if you're going to be looking at the reconstruction and rebuilding of the businesses that we are looking at, so obviously what will be of paramount importance for us would be the sourcing of, let's say, construction materials. Where are they going to source the materials that will be used in the rebuilding and the reconstruction program? Where are they going to be sourcing the skills from? So if it's in the township, we're actually encouraging the companies we work with to actually source the skills from our local communities, especially if they are not like your technical skills, which sometimes can, you know, be very difficult to source. So we're looking at the supplies that will be going towards the actual reconstruction program that we're looking at. Thereby, Chairperson, we believe that we'll be able to actually drive a localization and even creation of new manufacturing capabilities by these communities. So we're saying if you know, there was destruction that happened in Soweto, there will be no need to go and source those skills and companies from Sentin, because let's rather utilize the resources that are available on the ground. And then Chair, Honorable, I think it's Honorable Kaiso again, who raised the issue regarding our role in terms of providing support to informal traders. Chair, I have to say, this is a responsibility that actually falls within the Department of Small Business Development, because that is their core mandate. Having said that, Chair, the NEF does also provide some limited support, let me put it that way, to the informal traders, because if you look at the malls that we're talking about today, you'll actually find that there are a lot of informal traders that were part of that whole value chain. Even though they are not formal, you'll actually find them selling their goods and other things, you know, inside or outside the malls. So as we are rebuilding, once again, honorable members, we are saying, especially to the property developers, that let's use this opportunity to come up with another model of actually accommodating informal traders. So there was one property developer. He's one of the well-regarded property developers here in Gauteng, who has even agreed to actually come up with a structure and a model that would then allow the informal traders to be part of the formal value chain. So I have a story that I wanted to share with the committee around this. I'll ask Notula to just upload that slide, because it's actually very emotional, but it was just to agree with the committee that is something that we're looking into, and we'll be having a discussion with the Department of Small Business Development regarding a possibility of collaborating with them, because we meet these companies on a daily basis, but they fall outside of our domain, or purview as the National Empowerment Fund. And then I think it's Honorable Kaiso again, who raised an issue regarding our involvement in small commercial scale farming. Honorable Kaiso, I was under the impression that there was another bill that actually gave a huge allocation to the land bank to actually start focusing on this. Because what we have decided to do as the NEF is to focus on our mandate, given the other constraints that we have to actually do what we're doing and make sure that we do it well. So when it comes to small commercial scale farming, I think it was this committee that appropriated, I think that allocation is about 10 billion rands, if I'm not mistaken, Honorable Chairperson. But if there can be an allocation that can be given to us, would be very, would be very happy to actually play a role in this sector, because it's a sector that we're very passionate about. There are a few companies within the agro-processing sector of the economy, Black-owned companies that we have supported in the past, would like to do more. So if we can get an additional allocation to actually do that, we are passionate about this particular sector, Chair, because if you look at the GDP numbers for the last 2 quarters, there are 2 sectors that drove the growth, the little growth that we're seeing within the South African economy. That was the mining and the agro-processing sector. So, and if you look at the cost per job in the agro-processing sector, is actually the lowest in the whole economy. And then there was a question that was raised by the chair on the estimation of this, the 20 billion rand, in terms of the GDP that was lost. So there, Honorable Chair and members, I think it all depends on the econometrics models that were actually used by the different companies that were trying to consolidate the numbers. Obviously, the numbers vary. There's 30 billion, that has been also announced. There's 20, and then there's another entity that also announced 50. I think it will be a good thesis for one of the students who are studying economics to actually come up with the right numbers for us. So, but we fully agree with your comment, Chair. And then I think it was Honorable Deboer who wanted to know about the availability of the PPEs that were manufactured or produced by our local companies, which obviously is still a part of this localization drive. So we received an allocation from the DTIC 200 million rands last year to provide support in this particular area. So the 200 million was actually utilized to provide support to Black-owned companies that are looking at, getting involved in the manufacturing sector of these PPEs. So, but what is of critical importance, honorable members, is to then ensure that our big, government hospitals, private hospitals in South Africa and other SOEs, that they also begin to source some of these, some of these products that are produced by our local manufacturers, regardless of whether those manufacturers are Black or white. They must be supported by the state. I think our government should actually drive that initiative, because if it's driven by government, I think it will be supported by the private sector as well. So, and then Honorable Matafa, so he wanted to know whether we are still considering applications that would have been received during the normal course of doing our work. Yes, Honorable Matafa, we are still doing that work. However, as the NEF, we only have 140 employees. So we have allocated more resources towards providing this response to the crisis. So this work, we'll be doing it maybe over the next 2 or 3 months, so that when we are done, we will then make sure that we then move our resources back into our full operations. So with the 140 employees that we have, I had already mentioned that 30 of those employees were physically on the ground in KZN, but we are still looking at transactions from all the key sectors of the economy.
Recording
and then
stopped.
On how we educate, I think
Recording
it was,
in progress.
I think it was still Honorable Matafa on how we educate our clients on how to access the various packages that we were referring to. As we said, Honorable Matafa, so we've been all over the country, we've been using webinars. The NEF is also part of the Premier's, there's something called KZN Coalition that is spearheaded by the Premier in KZN. So we're also part of that initiative. We're working with local DFIs and so on and so forth. So what we've been doing when we visit these companies, so the colleagues who go there, we offer them a package. So in that package are the application forms. So we don't say you will apply online. So the colleagues have actually gone to these places. They will sit with the applicants, the business owners, and take them through that particular application form. So we don't just hand it over to them and then we disappear. So I think it was Honorable Matafa who said he hasn't come across a company that has received this assistance. In our portfolio, we have more than 600 companies that we have physically interacted with. Honorable Peters, I think a lot of the issues that were raised by Honorable Peters have been attended to. Honorable Mlenzana was raising an issue regarding the informal traders. I have already dealt with that. Honorable Peters was making reference to the looting of funeral parlors. All I can confirm, Honorable Peters, is that the NEF has already approved more than 20 businesses that operate within the space. So it confirms, I think, your concerns that you are raising. So they were looted, we've seen it because we have actually been to these particular areas. And then lastly, Chairperson, before I share this one slide with you, the 2.1 billion that is sitting in our pipeline from the chair. So Chair, if we have 2.1 billion now, so it means we have already done most of the work that we're supposed to do. It means we've been to these companies. So it then becomes a question of collating this information and writing the reports, the investment reports, even though this time around we're doing a condensed version of our investment reports. So it's not like the comprehensive reports that we normally do with financial modeling. We still do financial modeling, but a shorter version of a cash flow analysis and all of that. And then the Solidarity Fund, the conditions, we're very excited, Chairperson, because they will be providing grant funding. So it means it's going to be blended because there will be a portion that will be coming from the NEF side, then we'll blend it with the grant portion that's coming from the Solidarity Fund. I think that's it from my side. I'll just show the one slide and then request my colleague to talk to it in 2 minutes, Chairperson. Thank you very much. Tuli, can you load it?
Thank you, CEO. Thank you, Chair. And host, may I request the host to allow me to share because it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
It's the last slide, Chairperson.
So it's okay, and we didn't see the presenter.
The presenter is Ms. Noktula Nkomo Fagutse. Tuli, are you able to get there? Okay, can you share?
It still who can share, only host. Let me try now.
Darren, can you allow Ms. Fagutse the
I've already done that, Chairperson.
Okay. Ms. Fagutse, how's it going?
Getting the, is it visible, Honorable Chair?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you so much. Good afternoon, Honorable Chair, Honorable members, Honorable CEO, and the CEO of the IDC, as well as our colleagues from the IDC and the NEF, as well as the DTIC CFO and the colleagues. I'm going to take you through this. It's one of our CSI case studies that we are very proud to talk about. It's about Ms. Msomi from KZN, who was affected by the recent riots. So what happened is that he was affected by the riots on the 8th of July. So Mr. Msomi lost his job in 2020 during the COVID lockdown. And what happened thereafter was that he was getting the 350 social grant. So he really spread or extended this social grant of 350 by starting a small business, a small kiosk, where he was serving food to the local community of Umlazi. So he's a young person who's qualified in the arts sector, And then after losing his job, he then took the money, he saved it, and he managed to raise an amount of 3,000, which he used to start this business. So what happened was that he identified a small site which he used to build a shack, which he started this small business with his friend. So what he was selling from that was like things like beef kidneys, the beef rolls, chicken wraps, boerewors, hot dogs, and stuff. So we saw one enthusiastic and driven young person who was able to stretch and take the 350 and make it go a long way in looking after his family as well as his own siblings. So this is a picture of Mr. Msomi, and as you can see here, this is the site which was operating from, which was banned as a result of the riot. So as the NEF, we managed to reach out after we saw the story being screened on ENCA. We reached out to Mr. Msomi, identified, and we found him, and then we offered to assist him through our CSI program, whereby we are going to get him a steel container, and we are going to assist him to get equipment so that he can pursue his business and passion. So we have already acquired the equipment, and we are now in a process of getting it established inside, which is, he has already identified, and which is the same site where he was operating from. Thank you so much, Honorable Chair and the honorable members.
Thank you, Ms. Fagute. Honorable members, let me thank you for being patient. And as I said, when we raised questions, we raised a lot of questions. It shows the interest that we are having at DTIC, IDC, and NEF. And as you could see, Team DTIC, that we have got interest and we still have got more questions. As I said at the beginning of my input, that we are still definitely going to interact. But thank you very much for the presentations and your response to the questions. But I think I need to thank the honorable members for being patient and raising all the questions that we have raised. But before I close, I think in his absence, we need to congratulate the minister and the deputy ministers, the DG, and the whole of Team Treasury. It's very clear that they've been, Team DTIC. It's very clear that they've been on the ground responding to the shock that took everybody by surprise. But I think one thing we should also note, honorable members, is that we haven't had any reports of corruption and malfeasance. First, during the PPE first round, and even now. And from our side, we think it's very important that you keep that a track record, CFO and the institutions that came before us. What that does, it allows us to deal with real issues, the issues which are impacting on our people, rather than spending a lot of time dealing with governance and governance-related issues. I think with those few words, thank you very much. Darren, I know that we needed to deal with the minutes. Can we just postpone them? I think we'll try and approve our minutes in the next meeting. Are there any announcements, Darren, or before that, CFO? Is there anything from your side?
Chair, no specific announcement, but to thank the Standing Committee on Appropriations for the very detailed set of questions and comments. And I think as we roll out the program and deploy these instruments, I think the points that you've outlined around transformation, the support to women, youth, person with disability-owned businesses are on the fore. And I think the comments and the insights that's been provided today will really assist the department and its agencies in really rolling out a very effective and efficient program And as you rightfully said, I think we need to then ensure that these funding reaches our people and ensure that it does make a difference. Thank you, Chair.
When last were you in Glencoe?
Chair, I've been recently to to Glencoe. I've also visited Dundee. Chair, not too long back, my folks are still part of that community.
Yeah, I think I would be approaching DTIC at some stage to see how do you revive the economies of those areas. I don't know what you did with Kilty Sweet Factory. Okay, but,
most definitely. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. CEOs, NEF, IDC, CFO, and the team. Thank you very much. Honorable members, this brings us to the end of our meeting. When is our next meeting, Darren?
Chairperson, it's on Friday. We will be having public hearings on the bill.
What time?
3 o'clock, Chairperson.
Okay, honorable members, don't forget Friday. Let's try to avail ourselves. But thank you very much to all of you. The meeting stands adjourned.
Friday, 3 o'clock.
Yeah. I was listening carefully, and I was like, yeah. Hey, no ways, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable members. Ciao.
Yeah.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you.
Thanks, Chairperson.
Thank you, colleagues. Mawane, I see you. And everybody else is on the platform.
Recording stopped.
Thank you, Chair.
Sharp. Thank you. Good evening.
Okay.